This is Audible.
Audible Studios presents His Stolen Secret, Book 2 of His Secret series, written by Terry Ann Browning, performed by Carly Robbins and Jacob Morgan.
Prologue. Tris. 7 years ago. The heat of the summer sun was soaking into every pore, turning my muscles into jelly and filling my brain with a sleepy fog that I wasn't ready to be pulled from. It was the first day of summer vacation at my father's house, and all I wanted to do was lie out by the pool all summer long. My first year of college had been brutal. I had been away from everyone I knew and loved for the first time in my life. Yet I hadn't spent my new freedom partying it up like I knew Kim had been doing at her own college of choice this year. I had worked hard, rarely even left my dorm room, unless it was to go to class or to eat, and studied until I had been sure I would start reciting econ material in my sleep. I wanted my father to know I was taking college serious, that I was someone who would work hard and do an excellent job, someone he could be proud to bring into his company and teach the ropes to. I didn't want to treat it like one big party, unlike Kim, who was just happy to be away from her mother. I understood why my stepsister was so happy to be away from Nancy, but the girl had gone a little wild. Too wild, maybe, which had me worried. Pushing all thoughts of my stepsister from my sleepy mind, I turned over on the lounge chair I had pulled over to the edge of the pool, making sure that my top was in place. I untied the strings around my neck and behind my back so I wouldn't have tan lines. Within minutes, I was drifting off again as a light breeze brushed over my sweating body. The feel of large, warm hands rubbing something onto my bare back startled me awake, but I didn't scream. Just one touch from this man, and my body was turning into an inferno with a need that scared the hell out of me at times. Dom massaged sunscreen into my shoulders, releasing the last of the tension that had filled my muscles with end-of-term finals the week before. "You're just begging for a bad burn, aren't you?" my stepbrother grumbled, though I could hear something else in his tone, amusement mixed with the need that we had both been walking around for a while now. "I thought you liked it when I begged," I murmured with a sassy flip of my hair as I started to sit up. Almost too late, I remembered that my bikini top was undone and quickly covered my chest with my hands until I got everything in place again. Thankfully, he was still behind me, and I didn't have to worry about flashing him with my oversized breasts. Dom dipped his hand lower, rubbing more sunscreen over the small of my back, and then down to the top of my bikini bottoms. I felt one of his fingers lift the material, his thumb brushing over the top of my rear. "This ass is going to get me in trouble," he muttered so low that I barely heard him. Liquid heat pooled between my legs at his continued touch and nearness. I felt his breath on the back of my neck seconds before he touched my hair. "Pink? Really, Tris?" I glanced at him from over my shoulder, giving him a sassy smirk. "Hey, it's my one act of defiance all year long. I couldn't let your mother think she was winning." His mouth turned firm at the mention of Nancy, but then he grinned. "I like the pink, baby." Pleasure exploded in my chest as I turned to face him. It had been 3 months since I had last seen my sexy stepbrother, but in that time, we had texted every day and called each other almost as often. There wasn't a day that went by that we didn't speak. That was how it had always been with us, though. From the very first day I met my new stepbrother, we had connected. That had been 4 years ago, when I was just 15. As I had grown up, our friendship had strengthened and grown into something more. At least, for me it had. For him, I knew it was turning into something more, but I just didn't know what more it was yet. "How are finals?" he asked, moving so he was lying down on my lounger on his side with his head propped up on his hand. "Aces all around," I assured him. Although a week ago I hadn't been so sure of myself. I had called him practically in tears, stressed to the max over my econ final. I had been positive I was going to fail. A proud smile lifted his lips. That's my girl. I stretched out beside him, turning to face him. There was only an inch or so distance between us. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, burning me hotter than the sun's rays could ever attempt to. How is the residency going? He was a first-year resident working at one of NYC's busiest hospitals. I'm on call tonight, he told me with a grimace. Otherwise, I would take you out to celebrate. I would rather celebrate at home anyway, I assured him. You know I don't like the whole club scene. Something darkened in his eyes. I wasn't planning on taking you to a club, Triss. Oh, I murmured stupidly, unsure of what else to say. He had the power to turn off my brain, to make my mouth clam up and my body open like a flower blooming just for him. Maybe this weekend, though. He lifted a hand, tracing long, thick fingers over my jaw, deceptively soft before pushing a few strands of my pink and blonde hair behind my ear. The parents are going to Vermont for the weekend. We could have the house to ourselves for once. My body began to hum at just the possibility of the promise I heard in his voice. The look in his eyes burned through me, until my entire body felt like it was singing. Shyly, I reached out and brushed a speck of lint off the dark blue shirt that stretched over every well-cut muscle of his torso. Maybe. You're a minx. You know that? He sat up, slapped me playfully on the rear, then stood. I have to go before you tempt me into doing something I can't finish. Find a dress for this weekend, he called over his shoulder. Something nice. I rolled my eyes and turned back onto my front, once again letting the sun's heat wash over me. It didn't come close to the blaze that was already burning between my thighs. 1. Triss. Present day. The hunger in my stomach was nothing compared to the chaos going through my head. There weren't enough hours in the day to take care of everything that needed my attention. Over and over I went through my mental to-do list. My heart felt heavy. I was losing my mother. Every day when I went to see her in the hospital, I saw her fading away a little more. The cancer was destroying her, and I was powerless to help. I was terrified of what would happen when she finally gave up the fight. The light I had been stopped at turned green, but I took my time driving through the intersection, knowing that someone would run the red light at the last second. It never failed. In the rearview mirror, I chanced a glance at the two most precious things I still had. No matter what, I had to make sure that I didn't lose them. I bit down hard on my bottom lip, no longer feeling the pain as my teeth pierced through the already tortured flesh. If I started crying now, I wouldn't be able to stop, and I wasn't about to upset either of them. Through everything that had happened over the last year, I had attempted to hide the worst from them. They were so little, only 6 and 4. They didn't need to face the reality of the cold, harsh world. Not yet. For now, I wanted them to still be kids with no worries, except if I was making them mac and cheese for dinner.
Is Mommy coming home, Triss?
I quickly lowered my gaze from the mirror, so Daisy couldn't see the tears that had filled them at the mention of our mother. No, baby, not tonight.
Oh,
she said with a sigh that sounded older and wiser than her 4 years. She didn't sound sad, just resigned. It killed me a little more inside. In need of a distraction, I turned on the radio. My car was old and getting it to start every morning required me to sell part of my soul. But at least the stereo worked. Mostly. It was stuck on the local country music station. I had never been much of a fan, but I had learned to live with it, and had slowly started to actually enjoy some of the music. Lily was a huge fan of Hunter Hayes, so when his latest song came on, she was singing along at the top of her lungs. Daisy covered her ears, whining about the loudness, but I didn't try to stop either of them. This was my madness. It was hard and crazy and nowhere near perfect, but I wouldn't give those two up for any amount of money. It was another 10 minutes before we got home. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot of our apartment, I unbuckled my belt and turned to look at them in their booster seats. "Don't let go of my hand, okay?" I said the same thing every day, not wanting them to have a reason to forget. Ever. My apartment wasn't in the best part of the city. Until they had come to live with me, I hadn't really cared that the girl on the floor above me turned tricks and brought her work home with her on a regular basis. Any more than it disturbed me that my landlord was a part-time drug dealer. I had just been happy to have a roof over my head and a place to call my own, without the help of my father's money. With that damn check that was still sitting in the bottom of my nightstand, signed by a man I had thought I had known inside and out. That had all changed when my mother had called to tell me she was sick. There was no insurance, and she couldn't work any longer. She had lost the house I'd grown up in, and she had no choice but to move in with me. If it had just been her, I wouldn't have cared. But it wasn't. Lily and Daisy were too precious to play with their safety. But money had always been tight, and now it was non-existent. I was lucky to keep the girls from going hungry, only feeding myself enough to stay alive so they didn't have to feel the pain of an empty stomach. It looked like my stepmother was going to finally have the last laugh, because I was desperate enough to cash that fucking check. It was 6.5 years late, but she would be rubbing her hands in malicious glee that she had won in the end.
Okay, Tris.
They echoed at the same time, making Daisy giggle. I got out, quickly unbuckled them and held onto their hands just as tightly as they held onto mine as we ran across the parking lot. The sun was going down, and soon there would be crackheads and hookers all over the place. Keeping the girls tucked close, we took the stairs to the second floor, then hurried into my single-bedroom apartment. I released Lily's hand long enough to unlock the door, and then pushed them both inside. Turning the 6 locks on my door, I locked us inside. A few extra deadbolts wouldn't keep a determined person out, but it offered me a slice of relief to hear them slide into place. Daisy took her coat off and started on her shoes.
Can we have mac and cheese?
Sure, baby. I pulled my coat off. It was at least 3 years old and worn, but it kept me warm, which was all that mattered. Wash up while I fix it. Lily, help her, please.
She's 4 now, Tris,
Lily argued, her cute little nose wrinkled as she concentrated on unbuttoning her own coat.
She's not a baby anymore. Yeah, I'm not a baby,
Daisy seconded. It was the same argument every day. No, you're not a baby, but you're tiny and Lily is taller. She can help you. Please? Lily finished unbuttoning her coat and rolled her eyes at me. Not for the first time. I wondered if I had done the same thing when I was her age.
Fine. Come on, Daisy.
Shaking my head at the two of them as they went into my tiny little bathroom, I went into the kitchen to start on dinner. There were only 2 boxes of generic macaroni and cheese left, half a box of crackers, and enough peanut butter to make the girls a sandwich for school the next day. Seeing the bareness of my pantry, I nearly whimpered. I had maybe $10 in my purse, maybe, and that had to pay for a little gas so I could get to work. I didn't get paid until Friday, and that was still 4 days away. Looked like I was going to the bank the next morning. My teeth sunk into my bottom lip again. I tasted blood but didn't bother to release my hold on the tender flesh. It felt like the world was crashing down on top of me. And that stupid check was the last stone still holding the sky up. I had been so strong until now, but I couldn't do it any longer. I couldn't make the girls suffer when I had an easy solution. When our mother had been admitted into the hospital the first time, I had applied for assistance to help with the girls, which showed how much of a grudge I could still hold against my father's wife. If I would seek out government aid rather than just cash that ridiculous check she had handed over to me when I was 19. But I made $50. $50 freaking dollars. Too much to qualify for any benefits, even with 2 little girls as dependents. They hadn't wanted to know that my mother was sick. I had just been a number to them. Blinking back my tears, I turned away from the nearly empty pantry and grabbed a pot to start boiling water. There was no use in worrying about it tonight. I couldn't do anything until after I dropped the girls off the next morning anyway. While the water boiled, the girls took their places at the scarred-up little table that had come with the apartment. I had bleached the hell out of it when I had moved in, but it still held the carved marks from the tenants before me. Daisy traced her finger over one of the words, and I cringed at the thought of her asking what those letters spelled. She never did, but she was in preschool and soon would be able to read it herself. To distract myself from how that conversation was likely to go, I reached for the stack of mail I had picked up that morning, yet hadn't had time to look through. Bills, some new, some past due, seemed to mock me as I went through the heavy pile. My rent included my gas and water, but I had to pay for electric separately. The rent was 2 weeks late, and the electric was so past due I was surprised they hadn't already shut it off. I just needed them to hold off until Friday. I would get it paid, and then worry about the 1,000,001 other things I needed to pay for to get us through 2 more weeks until my next paycheck. As I fingered through the mess, I found a letter addressed to me from a law firm in New York City, and set it aside. Probably another bill collector. There had been plenty of those lately. The water started boiling, and I finished making our small dinner. My stomach wasn't happy with the small portion I gave myself, but I smiled brightly as the girls told me about their day at school. I was lucky enough to have a school nearby that offered a preschool program for working mothers, so I didn't have to find a daycare that I couldn't afford to put Daisy in. So far, she enjoyed it, but Lily wasn't a fan. She would have rather been drawing and coloring than reading or learning math. My fridge was covered in her artwork. After dinner, I gave them both a bath, then tucked them into my full-sized bed. Sometimes I slept with them, but more often than not, I curled up on the little love seat in the living room. The thing was lumpy as hell with springs sticking up in various places, but it was 10 times better than having to twist and contort my body by sleeping in the same bed with the acrobats those two became in their sleep. Once they were in bed, I went back into the living room. I had given up on buying coffee months ago, so I had to settle for some iced water as I picked up one of the new books I had exchanged at the library on Sunday. I could barely feed the girls, so things like TV weren't on my list of priorities. I had never been much of a television watcher anyway. Instead, I enjoyed getting lost in a good book. Tonight, I was reading a new thriller. It caught my attention immediately, and I was several chapters into it before I forced myself to close it and go to bed. Taking my empty glass into the kitchen, I set it in the sink. Then, as I turned away, my gaze landed on the piece of mail from the law firm. Wondering how much the bill collector wanted now, I picked it up and tore it open. I would never be able to pay off all the bills my mother's hospital stays were adding up to, even if I worked until I was 90. I wouldn't even put a dent in them. Sighing, I pulled out the letter, noticing that it was on thick, beautiful stationery. That was new. The notices normally came on paper so thin they were practically transparent. Opening the letter, I scanned the contents for an amount, but when I didn't see any numbers flashing out at me, I glanced back at the top. 2 sentences in, and my suddenly nerveless fingers dropped the letter. I staggered back, tears already burning my eyes as I tried to hold back a sob. No. No, someone would have called me. They wouldn't let me find out this way. Even as heartbreaking pain sliced through me, the truth rolled its eyes at how naive I could still be. Of course they wouldn't call me. Not one of them wanted anything to do with me. Once I had been so forcefully tossed out of my father's life, they probably never even gave me another thought. Why the hell would they bother with telling me the most painful news a girl could ever hear? As I lost the fight to hold back my tears, my legs began to give out, and I helplessly fell onto my knees, sobbing into my hands as I buried my face in them. My father was gone. I didn't know how or why or even when, because I hadn't been able to get my brain to function long enough to read more, once the reality of what had happened had sunk in. He was gone, and I would soon lose my mother, too. Through all the crap I had gone through with my father over his wife, Nancy, I had still loved him. Part of me had hoped he had still loved me, too, despite the vile things my stepmother had convinced him I had done. But in the 7 years since I had last seen him, I hadn't gotten so much as a birthday card from him. Once upon a time, he and I had been close. Every summer I would go down to New York City and spend the school break with him. 3 months of just him and me. He would take the time off work, something he'd only ever done for me until Nancy came alone, leaving his beloved company in the hands of his CEOs. He had been my hero, the man who had loved me more than anything else on the planet. And I had loved him more than any girl ever loved their daddy. Then, when I was 15, he had married Nancy, and things had changed drastically. I had still gone to the city to be with him every summer, but he no longer had time for me. He had been gone all the time with her, and when he wasn't trekking around the world buying his new wife all the pretty trinkets she wanted, Nancy would make sure to manipulate his time. It hadn't been all bad, though. With a new stepmother, I had also gotten 2 step-siblings. I had always wanted a sister, and Kimberly had been my age, so we had bonded easily. Her brother had been in college, but he had been on summer break just like I was. I pulled back from even the slightest memory of Dominic Baller, unable to think about him without remembering his last, ultimate betrayal. Of them all, he was the one I would have expected to inform me of Robert Prescott's passing. Then again, I had been so terribly wrong about him before, so it wasn't like I could trust him with something that important now. Forcefully swallowing the lump that was trapped in my throat, I fell onto my rear, my back hitting the cabinet behind me that had been white once upon a time, but was now an ugly yellow color. At the thought of Dom, my tears had begun to dry up. The letter from the law firm was to my left, and with trembling fingers, I picked it up again. Miss Prescott, we hope this letter finds you in good health. Our deepest condolences are with you and your family during this moment of loss and grief at the passing of your father on November 2nd? He had been gone for 3 weeks now. 3 fucking weeks. We at Goldwyn, Allister, and Marsh have been taxed with distributing the contents of his will. Mr. Prescott left strict instructions to notify you upon his death. You are named as a primary benefiter of his will. Please contact us at the number above at your earliest convenience, so we can make arrangements to meet the terms. I was surprised the firm had waited 3 weeks to notify me, if my father had left such strict instruction about his will. If anything, I figured Nancy would have jumped in head first to have the will read and distributed within hours of Robert's passing. Then again, it had probably been hard to find me. When I had last seen my father, I had still been living at home with my mother and stepfather. Derek Everest had been a military man and had treated my mother like a queen. They had been so happy, so in love. But when Daisy was 2, Derek had been killed in Iraq on what was supposed to be his final deployment before he retired. After the death of her husband, my mother had withdrawn into the woman she had been before she had met Derek. She had lost herself in the past, in the memories that she had to live with from the moment she had found out she was expecting me. I had been the product of my mother's wild teenage years. Everyone had wanted her to abort me, but she had loved me too much to ever give me up like that. While my parents hadn't gotten married, my father had stuck by Savannah and helped support me growing up. I didn't have anything to do with my mother's parents, and Robert had died when I was a little girl. That hadn't mattered because my parents had made sure I knew I was loved and taken care of. Until Nancy had come along. Now I had lost my father, and I was losing my mom a little more with each passing day. Tears filled my eyes too quickly for me to blink them away. Giving up the fight, I let them fall. I hadn't let myself cry often over the last year. There was no use. But sometimes it all became too much, and I had to either cry or implode. If I'd had anything in my life, it was my mother's love, and soon I wouldn't even have that. I was already the girls' legal guardian, but unless I found a way to keep us all fed, someone would step in and take them from me. And that was what scared me the most, losing the only family I had left, the only two people who I loved more than life itself. That stupid check was my last resort, but if my father had left me something, maybe I wouldn't have to touch it. Yet. Trembling from head to toe now, I stood and found my prepaid phone. I dialed the number listed at the top of the stationery. It was 9:30. The law office was probably closed, and I should wait until morning. But my heart was beating too hard for me to wait even a second longer. I would just leave a message on their answering service.
Goldwyn, Alistair, and Marsh, this is Amber speaking.
Another wave of surprise hit me. Not only because someone had answered, but the voice was so oddly familiar. Amber. Amber, Ash, and Taryn. They had been close friends, and they had all lived in the same neighborhood as my father. Once upon a time, I had been semi-friends with them. We would hang out every summer, even though the other three had been a little older than me.
Hello? Is anyone there?
Clearing my throat, I finally answered her. This is Tris Prescott. I got a letter from your firm about my... I had to stop and clear my throat again when tears threatened to choke me. My father's death.
Oh, right.
Of course. Sympathy filled the other woman's voice.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Tris.
There was a small pause on her end, and I didn't know what to say to break it. Actually, I thought I would have heard from you sooner. Your stepmother told us that she had contacted you. A headache was starting to brew right between my eyes. I pressed my fist to the center of my forehead, hoping to relieve it. No, I gritted out, hearing the judgment in her tone. Typical. Nancy only had to say a handful of words and people automatically assumed the worst of me. I didn't even know my father had passed away until I got your letter, which was today. I only opened it just now. Hell, Amber. I haven't spoken to my family in years.
Oh.
How did it happen? I figured my stepmother wouldn't supply the information readily for me, and I doubted Kim or Dom would either.
A major heart attack.
The sympathy was once again back in her voice. She was quiet for a long moment, letting me absorb that, before speaking again.
To get to the point of the letter we sent, the will needs to be read as soon as possible. If I had known you were still in the dark about everything,
I would have contacted you sooner. She sighed heavily.
I'm so sorry you had to find out like that. It isn't right. Nancy said that...
When? I cut her off abruptly, not caring in the least what new lies my stepmother had been telling the world.
Right. Sorry. If you could come in tomorrow?
I thought about my mother and the chemo treatment she was going to have the next morning. She would be so sick afterward. There was no way I could leave her when she needed me. No, tomorrow isn't good for me. How about the day after?
That works even better, actually. Can you be at my office at 10:30?
Yes, that's fine. Whatever is fine. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to ask, but I needed to know so I could prepare myself. Who else will be there? Nancy, of course. Dom and Kim as well. Just you four, my secretary, and me. Perfect, I muttered. I'll see you then, Amber. Before she could speak again, I hung up and dropped the phone onto the table's scarred surface. Fuck me. But I didn't know what I was going to do now. I didn't want to face any of them. If I was being honest with myself, though, stepping into the lair once again was a much more appealing option than having to cash the blood money that stupid check represented. Even if my father had only left me a little something, which I wasn't going to completely hold my breath over, then I would be able to take care of the girls a little easier. In the end, I had to cash that stupid check after all. I woke up the next morning with the realization that whatever my father had given me wasn't likely to take care of the girls. He had probably changed his will the minute he had kicked me out of his house and his life. I dropped the girls off at school, then called my boss to remind him I was going to be late getting in. He was good about letting me take my lunch hour in the morning so I could sit with my mother when she had her chemo treatments. On my way to the hospital, I stopped by the bank and cashed the check. With the money now in my checking account, I could breathe a little easier, knowing I could take care of the girls. Nevertheless, my heart felt beat all to hell as I walked into my mother's semi-private room. She was sitting up in bed, a bag of poison attached to her IV, pumping the chemo treatment into her. Later she would be sick, and I wouldn't be there to hold her hand. I never brought the girls in on the evenings that our mother had her treatments. The only time I had, it had left Daisy and Lily in tears at seeing Savannah so ill. My mother's hair was completely gone now. I had shaved her head when she had first started losing her beautiful golden locks. She didn't even have eyebrows by this point. We both knew she wasn't ever going to get her hair back. The chemo wasn't working as well as the doctors had hoped. For now, it was only keeping the tumors at bay, prolonging her life for as long as they could before the cancer finally overtook her poor body. It wasn't going to be long now. We knew it. We had accepted it. That was a lie. I would never accept it. My mother was my hero, my strength, the woman who had sacrificed so much for me. She had given up her family to have me. Even as I had grown up, she had sacrificed repeatedly to give me the kind of life she thought I deserved. What's wrong? Savannah demanded as I took my usual chair beside her bed. I had tried to keep a smile on my face, but despite how sick she must have been feeling, she was still very much my mother, and could see underneath all the bullshit to what I was really feeling. I wasn't going to tell her about the check. It would only make her mad. I couldn't, however, keep the news about my father from her. They might not have ever been man and wife, but until Nancy had come along, they had been friends. Rubbing my damp palms on my jeans, I met her gaze. That same blue-gray color was identical to my own, but the whites of her eyes were no longer white. They were a dirty yellow, because the cancer had reached her liver, causing jaundice. I got a letter yesterday from Goldwyn, Alistair, and Marsh, I began, but had to stop. The news of my father's death still felt raw. Savannah frowned. Why does that sound familiar? I swallowed the sudden lump that had filled my throat. Daddy used them. They drew up his will. Understanding filled her face. It broke my heart all over again when tears filled my mother's eyes. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. "Robert's dead, isn't he?" I could only nod, too choked up to speak. Savannah leaned forward and grasped both my hands. Her fingers were ice cold, but mine weren't much better. "Oh, my poor baby. I'm so sorry." As the first tears spilled free, I swallowed roughly again, trying to get enough room so I could talk. "He's been gone for weeks, Mama. No one bothered to tell me. I didn't get to go to the funeral. I didn't get to say goodbye." "Oh, honey." She tugged on my hands. and I went willingly as she pulled me onto the bed beside her and into her arms for a hug that only broke my heart more. These hugs, they were precious. Soon, I wouldn't have even this comfort. My tears came faster and faster, until I was sobbing against my mother's chest, crying for the loss of one parent as I prepared to lose another, crying for the pain of not getting to say goodbye to a man who had been my entire world when I was a child. I cried for that stupid check that was now cashed, every single dollar of it mocking me in my stepmother's cackling voice. Mostly, I cried for myself. 2. Tris. It was always hard to leave my mother, but that morning, as I had kissed her cheek, it was a million times worse. I wouldn't get to see her at all the next day, since I was taking the girls with me down to New York City to attend the reading of the will. I didn't expect to be gone longer than that day, so I told my boss I would be at work the day after, when I asked for the day off. As always, George was accommodating, and even sympathetic when I told him my father had died. That evening, I set out the girls' best clothes. Daisy's clothes looked a little better than poor Lily's, since she was in nice hand-me-downs from when Lily was her age. But the older girl had gotten her current wardrobe from Goodwill and yard sales. Still, I had taken care of their clothes better than my own, so they had a few things I could choose from to dress them with the next morning. For myself, I picked out a pair of black dress pants that weren't as shabby or dingy looking. I paired it with a simple black button-up that had been missing at least 3 buttons when I had first gotten it at the Goodwill. My shoes were 6-year-old Mary Jane's. One had a hole in the side, but as long as I kept my feet together when I was sitting, no one was likely to notice. All 3 of our coats were going to stand out when we walked into the prestigious law firm of Goldwyn, Allister, and Marsh. But I wasn't going to waste money on coats when the ones we had did the job they were meant to do. It was over a 6-hour drive down to New York City from Buffalo, so I had to get the girls up early. I bundled them up in the back seat of my old car and tucked blankets around them. Before I had even pulled out of the parking lot, they were sound asleep once again. As I waited at a traffic light, I looked back at them, my heart contracting with love. Lily looked just like our mother and me, but Daisy took after her father with her nearly black hair, those big brown eyes and her olive complexion. The girls were holding hands while Lily cuddled her favorite stuffed animal with her other arm. Daisy was sucking on her thumb. Reaching into the back seat, I tugged her hand down, but no sooner had I dropped my hand was that damn thumb back in her mouth. Sighing, because I had other things to worry about besides my baby sister sucking her thumb, I drove through the now green light and headed for the interstate. Traffic slowed us down, and then the girls had to pee 3 separate times, so by the time I pulled into the underground garage at Goldwyn, Allister, and Marsh, it was already 10:38. Hustling the girls into the elevator, it took us to the lobby and opened in front of a reception desk. The neatly dressed woman behind the desk looked up, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw the 3 of us. Slightly breathless, I took hold of Daisy's hand, knowing she would get into everything around her if I didn't rein her in. Lily stuck close to my side, holding one of the belt loops of my dress pants as we crossed the desk. "May I help you?" the woman asked with a tight smile that told me she hoped I was in the wrong place. "Tris Prescott for Amber Allister," I informed her, watching the woman's eyes grow wider, giving her an almost comical bug-eyed kind of appearance. "One moment, please," she murmured, picking up a phone. "Look, Tris," Lily said with a dazed tone. "They have a water fountain." I followed her gaze. It was a beautiful fountain, with stones and exotic flowers surrounding it. "Pretty," I told her, unconsciously stroking her long blonde hair, hoping to soothe myself with the comfort of what was familiar. Lily's silky hair under my fingertips grounded me, made me remember the reason I was there. The receptionist cleared her throat. "Mrs. Allister will be right down, Miss Prescott. If you would like to have a seat." I nodded and took the girls over to the leather ottomans near the fountain. I didn't sit, but crouched down in front of the girls once they were seated. I kept a hold of Daisy's hand and took Lily's as well. "Remember what we talked about. This is really important, okay? I need you to stay quiet like little church mice while I handle some business." Lily nodded.
"I promise, Tris." "Are you sad, Tris?" Daisy stroked a chubby little finger down my cheek with her free hand. "You look sad. Do you miss your daddy?"
At her innocent little question, tears filled my eyes, though I didn't let them fall. I couldn't afford to let the 3 vultures who would be in the same room with us see my weakness, especially Nancy. "Yes," I whispered. "I miss him very much." Daisy leaned forward, rubbing her little button nose against my own.
"I miss my daddy, too. Maybe they are playing together in heaven. My daddy liked to play."
My chin started to tremble, but I clenched my jaw. Yes, Daisy, he did like to play, and I hope that Derek is up in heaven playing with my daddy right now.
"Daddy liked to play tag,"
Lily murmured, her eyes darkening with sadness.
"He would chase us around and around the yard at our old house, but we were faster. Daddy could never catch us."
"I remember," I said with a smile as I cupped her cheek. "You two had the best daddy ever."
"I miss him," Lily whispered, her chin trembling. "I wish he was here."
Me too. Behind us, I heard an elevator ding as it arrived and stood, hoping Amber would be on it. As I turned, I saw the lovely blonde walking toward us in heels that probably cost me 6 months' rent. Her smile was warm as she held out her hand to me.
"Tris, it's so good to see you again."
I shook her hand and her smile dimmed. "I'm just sorry it is under such circumstances." Yeah, I would have preferred that myself. I held out my hand and Daisy instantly took it. Lily tucked herself against my leg, drawing Amber's eyes to them both. Her eyes went almost as wide as the receptionist's had.
"Who do we have here?"
she murmured, crouching so she was on their eye level. "This is Lily," I introduced, "and this is Daisy, my sisters." Amber offered them each her hand one at a time. Daisy shook it without so much as a blink of her eyes, but Lily hesitated, looking up at me and waiting for my nod before shaking hands with this stranger.
"Wow, girls, you're so polite."
Amber smiled sweetly at them.
"I have a son who just turned 6. His name is Jamie." "I'm 6,
Lily told her, growing a little more comfortable with this new person.
6.5. My birthday is March 10th.
"How exciting."
"My birthday is before that,"
Daisy told her, not wanting to be outdone by her sister.
"Mine is January 3rd. When's yours?"
Amusement was flashing through Amber's eyes. "Not until June, I'm afraid." She straightened, her smile fading. "We should go on up. Mrs. Prescott has been waiting." I refrained from rolling my eyes. Oh, how terrible for her. "Let's go up then, shall we? We don't want to keep her waiting more than necessary, do we?" Amber led us over to the elevators, dark amusement twinkling in her eyes. "No, let's not do that." I pressed my lips together, wishing that I didn't have to do this now, or ever, really. However, it couldn't be avoided. Therefore, I stepped onto the elevator with the girls once it opened, and held onto them tightly as we rode up to the 6th floor. "We're in the conference room," Amber said once the elevator let us off. She guided us down a long corridor and paused outside of a closed heavy door, her eyes falling to my sisters once again. "Would you rather leave the little ones with my secretary? Or Leo, my husband? Kids tend to like his company. Jamie adores him." Hell, I would have loved to have left the girls with one of those people, To have spared them having to see that there were bad people out there that looked like nice, respectable human beings. But Daisy started shaking her head, and Lily clung to my leg.
"No, Tris, don't leave us," the older girl whispered. "It's scary here."
I tried to give her a reassuring smile. "Okay, babies. I'm not going to let you out of my sight." "Okay," Amber said with a resigned nod. "Let's get this over with, then." As soon as the door opened, I heard Nancy's voice and froze where I stood. Girl never could tell time. Always inconveniencing people. She has only ever thought of herself. "Mother," Kim's voice reached my ears. "She probably just hit traffic. She was driving down from Buffalo." "Such a god-awful place," Nancy grumbled, her tone full of all the contempt she had for me. All I heard were the two other women, which made me wonder if a third was in there or not. Had Dom not shown up? Would I get at least one reprieve and not have to face him that day? Amber stepped into the room, clearing her throat. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mrs. Prescott." She turned back toward me and narrowed her eyes when she saw I hadn't moved.
"Ladies? Tris?" Lily breathed my name. "Are you okay, Sissy?"
Daisy whispered, looking worriedly up at me. I swallowed, hoping to calm the jumble of emotions swirling around in my head and my stomach. It had been over 6 years since I had seen Nancy, 7 since I had last seen Dom. I couldn't latch on to just one of the thousands of emotions trying to fight for supremacy in my heart right then. Anger, fear, rage, hurt. The hurt was the worst. The hurt I couldn't hide behind. It was like a living entity that wanted to consume me every second of every day, and right then, it was winning the fight I had always struggled against. "Well," Nancy snapped in her harsh, authoritative tone, "where is the little bitch? We're wasting time here." My spine stiffened at what she had just called me. I stepped into the conference room with the girls at my side, my gaze blocking out everything and everyone, until it landed on the woman sitting at the head of the table. Dressed in a black designer dress, with her hair perfectly styled, and her neck and ears dripping in expensive jewelry. Her finery couldn't hide the lack of a soul that left her dark gray eyes dull. Her face didn't show a single sign of having aged a day since the last time I had seen her. She must have been keeping her plastic surgeon in business on a monthly basis, with how firm her face looked. "Hello, Nancy?" My voice was cold, which had the girls tightening their hold on me. "Long time no see." Nancy's perfectly emotionless face twisted in outrage. I hoped she was remembering that last meeting as clearly as I was. "So, you have finally graced us with your presence. Come on, then. Let's get this over with. I have an appointment at noon." Oh, trust me. This couldn't possibly be over faster than I want it to be, I assured her with a sneer. "Mrs. Prescott, Tris," Amber motioned at the table with her hands. "Can we please sit down as adults? I promise you I will get you both out of here as quickly as possible. If you would only cooperate with me a little." Feeling like a child getting scolded, I reluctantly focused on the table she had indicated. I didn't look at Nancy again. Instead, I focused on the woman sitting beside her. Kim looked much better than the last time I had seen her. She had gained a little weight, which she had desperately needed, considering how underweight she had become after her first year of college. Her rich mahogany hair was long and flowed over one shoulder. Her makeup was expertly applied, and her dress was just as expensive as her mother's. My stepsister wasn't decked out in jewelry, though. Kim met my gaze for only a fleeting moment, gave me a tight smile, and then quickly looked away. But not before I saw the shame in her eyes. Not before I had seen the regret. I didn't call her out on it. Didn't demand she tell the room and the world why she had those feelings to begin with, where I was concerned. No. I just let my sneer say everything I couldn't put into words, while 2 innocent little girls were at my side. Then, as if my eyes couldn't help themselves, they finally found the only other person in the room. I held myself as tightly as I could to keep from letting my body flinch in reaction to seeing Dominic Ballard sitting so quietly at the table on his mother's other side. His face was blank, as if he didn't have a care in the world, as if he wasn't as destroyed at seeing me as much as I was at seeing him. 7 years. That was how long it had been since I had last seen this man. 7 years since he had blown my world into a pile of ash that I was helpless to put back together. He scanned me over, then smirked in that way that had always made me want to smack his handsome face. That smile was the same he had given me the first time we had met, when he was trying to be a jerk, but I had knocked his socks off with my sass. And then we had quickly become best friends. It told me things that words couldn't express. He wasn't as unaffected as he wanted me to think. Dom hid behind that smile when he wanted to keep what he was feeling from the world. He knew I would see it for what it was. Lily shifted uneasily beside me, and I realized I had tightened my hold on both girls to the point of discomfort. I hastily released them and crossed to the large table, taking a seat at the end opposite the other 3, putting as much distance between them as I possibly could. Lily took the chair to my left, and I pulled Daisy onto my lap, knowing she wouldn't sit in her own chair without finding some kind of trouble to get into. As Amber finally took her seat in the middle of the table, she laid out 5 thick documents. 1 for each of us? Lily sat forward, putting her hands on the table and looking longingly at the stack of blank copy paper and several pens only a small distance away.
Can I please draw, Tris?
She murmured so softly I knew the others couldn't have heard her. Amber? The other blonde lifted her head. May the girls use that to keep distracted? She beamed at me.
Of course. Have at it, little ones.
Lily brightened.
Thank you,
she murmured, and stood long enough to gather the paper and pens so she could share with Daisy. While the girls got comfortable, I could feel eyes drilling into me. Turning my head, I found Dom's eyes right on me. But it wasn't his I worried about. Nancy was glaring daggers at me. I couldn't help noticing how her gaze went from me to the girls. I locked an arm around Daisy, trying to protect her, but deep down, I knew it wasn't my baby sister who my evil stepmother was so interested in. Lily, unaware of the attention she was getting, was now off in her own little wonderland. She had already drawn a rough sketch of trees and a small pond. Her hands moved effortlessly, as if her fingers weren't even her own. I knew that when she drew, she didn't use her head, but her heart, which was why she was so talented, even at such a young age. Okay. Amber tapped her knuckles on the table beside her, drawing all eyes but the little girls to her.
Sadly, we are here to go over the will of Mr. Robert Daniel Prescott. You 4 are mentioned within it, and so, as I have been directed by the late Mr. Prescott, you must all be present for this initial reading.
Robert told me he changed his will to cut his daughter out, Nancy interrupted, shooting me a disgusted look. Amber pressed her lips together in irritation.
Actually, Mrs. Prescott, your late husband has changed his will several times throughout the years. We recently finalized his latest version.
If the girls hadn't been with me, I might have laughed at how pale my stepmother turned right then and there before she closed her mouth and turned her gaze away, looking at anything but the people in the room. I didn't have a clue what could make her look like she had seen a ghost.
Before I start on the will,
Amber shifted something out from under the document she had in front of her.
Mr. Prescott asked me to read this letter to everyone. I have no idea what is in this letter, as it was sealed when he gave it to me.
Her eyes drifted over to the girls.
I'll ask you all to remain calm and respectful of young ears, if whatever is in here upsets you.
When no one spoke, she opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of stationery. Even from where I was sitting, I could see the masculine writing that belonged to my father. My heart lifted into my throat as I prepared myself to hear what was quite possibly the last words my father had to say to me.
3. Dom. If I could have helped it, I wouldn't have been there. However, my mother had begged me to attend the reading of her late husband's will. Plus, Amber had told me I had to be there before she could read it since Robert had insisted, and I had a bequest from him. I didn't want whatever he had thought to leave me. The man had become a kind of mentor to me over the years, and all I really wanted was to have him back. He had been taken far too soon, and deep down I felt responsible for his death. I was a doctor, for God's sake. I should have recognized the warning signs, should have acted sooner. Maybe then my stepfather would still be with us. But, as a doctor, I knew that death was a tricky motherfucker. So I had come, not so much for my mother, but for Robert. And Triss. I didn't want to admit it, but it was the truth. I hadn't seen her in 7 years. I wanted to see for myself if she had changed. Wanted to see with my own eyes if she was the same girl who had nearly killed my sister. As soon as she had walked into the room, I had known she was still the same. Even without having spoken to her, I could tell. The pink she had once had in her long blonde hair was gone now, and her face had lost what little baby fat she had once carried in her cheeks. Was she still doing drugs? Anger burned through my chest even as I worried about her. She looked exhausted, run down, and practically malnourished. Still, even as I noticed how unhealthy she appeared, my heart raced as if I had been running all morning. Lower, my body was responding to just being in the same room with her. I was still unable to control my reaction to her, obviously. I hated that she could still affect me so effortlessly. I should have been too disgusted with her after everything she had done. Hell, she hadn't even had enough respect for her father to attend his funeral. Amber unfolded the letter Robert had left for us, and I forcefully pulled my gaze from Triss to my friend. She scanned over the contents and then snapped her head around, her gaze going straight to Kim. I followed her eyes and saw the way my sister flinched and shrank back at whatever look she saw on Amber's face. I knew the two hadn't ever really gotten along, but that look was full of anger, and maybe a little disgust. Clenching her jaw, the older woman turned back to the letter in her hands and began reading. My dearest Triss, if you are reading this, it's because I have passed on to the next world. My doctor recently told me that my heart is not as strong as it once was. I blame myself for that. It stopped working properly the day I allowed Nancy to force you out of my life. A small sound came from Triss, and I was helpless not to look at her. She had turned her face away, but I could still see that her chin trembled. I thought you said it was addressed to all of us, my mother snapped. Amber lifted her eyes from the letter. Mr. Prescott said that it was. He also made it a point to ensure you were all here for this. If you won't sit through it, you will automatically forfeit the contents of the will bequeathed to you, Mrs. Prescott. For heaven's sakes, my mother grumbled. Continue if you must. Let's just get this over and done with already. Amber began reading again. With each passing day, I can feel that my time on Earth is limited, and the countdown is rushing up on me too quickly for me to set things right with you, my dear daughter. For the longest time, I let myself believe the lies, the deceit that was so blaringly untrue. I am ashamed of myself for being led to believe them in the first place. What does that mean? My mother muttered as she fidgeted with her handkerchief, twisting it in a way that told me she was nervous. My eyes narrowed on her, trying to read the woman who had given birth to me. What was she so agitated over? I knew she didn't like Triss, but the way she was acting was too uncharacteristic for her to simply be, because her stepdaughter was now in the same room with her. Amber didn't acknowledge my mother's interruption. I didn't even give you a chance to defend yourself before I threw you out of the house that day, Triss. I have regretted that every day since. If I had only listened to you, then none of the pain I have caused you and myself would have had to happen. Stop, Kim whispered. Amber was deaf to her. An odd suspicion has been eating at me for some time now, and a year ago I hired a private detective to help me find the answers I was too afraid to ask you. What he uncovered showed me that I should have trusted you all along. Please. Kim was crying now. Amber, stop. I now know that it wasn't you who gave Kimberly those vile drugs that nearly ended her life. She had gotten in with the wrong people at college, is still involved with them from what I can tell, and had brought them home with her. You were innocent of everything. My investigator has informed me that nothing he has uncovered even suggests that you have ever done drugs. Nancy, my pathetically greedy wife... That is enough! Nancy stood so quickly her chair tipped back. I reached out, stopping it from crashing to the floor. I will not sit here while you read such nasty lies to us about my daughter. Amber blinked up at her, not in the least unnerved by my mother's cold temper. Oh, but it gets so much better from here on, Mrs. Prescott. My mind was racing with what Amber had read so far. Kim had overdosed on a mixture of drugs 7 years ago. She had nearly died, probably would have if I hadn't been home that day and heard her. Tris had been with me, and we had gotten my sister to the hospital together. It had been one of the scariest days of my life. It was later, after my mother and stepfather had returned from their weekend away, that the same drugs had been found in Tris's room. Whatever I had been feeling for Tris had withered and turned to dust then and there. How could I possibly love someone who was responsible for my sister's close encounter with death? At least I had told myself that my feelings had died. As soon as she had walked into the conference room, my heart and body had made a liar of me. Now Robert was telling me, from the goddamn grave no less, that it hadn't been true, that Tris wasn't the one responsible. My heart stopped beating in my chest as the realization of what I had done, what I had fucking lost, hit me between the eyes like a wrecking ball. I looked across the long table that separated me from Tris, silently begging her to look at me. Tris. I breathed her name and saw her chin tremble again. Tris, look at me. I can't, she whispered before clearing her throat. Amber, must you really finish this letter? It's addressed to me, and I would like my father's last words to me to be just that, to me. I don't want to share this with them. But your father wanted... He's dead, Amber! She cried, then quickly lowered her tone when the little girl to her left flinched. Please, those are my words, and I can't share them with anyone else. Don't make me have to give them that, too. The two shared a long look before Amber finally folded the letter and replaced it back in its envelope. She slid it across the table to Tris before picking up the actual will. Sit down, Mrs. Prescott. I would like to tell you what your darling husband bequeathed to you. My eyes were trained on Tris, so I didn't see the look on my mother's face as she finally took her seat once again. Kim was quietly crying. The noise reached me, but I was too stunned by what had just happened to bother looking at her. Tris picked up the envelope and held it close to her heart for a long moment before slipping it into her coat pocket. My eyes finally registered the state of her coat and the rest of her clothes. It, along with the rest of her outfit, looked threadbare and old. The last time I had seen her, she had been wearing Prada sunglasses, designer heels, and a dress that she had begged me to strip off her. What the hell had happened to her in the years since I had last seen her? If she wasn't doing drugs like Robert's letter had suggested, then why did she look like she hadn't eaten in days? This is the last will and testament of Robert Daniel Prescott. I name Amber Allister as my executor to carry out all provisions of this will. To my stepson, Dr. Dominic Baller, I leave 1 car of his choosing from my collection and the sum of $1 million. My mother's huff was in outrage, but she kept her mouth shut. I didn't know why she was so upset about what Robert would leave me. I didn't want the money or the pick of his car collection. I didn't need either. But he had left it to me, and I wouldn't disrespect the man by turning them down, especially one of his custom-restored muscle cars that we had picked out together at auctions almost every summer when I was younger. He had been my first real father figure, had loved me like I was his own. Fuck, I missed him so damn much. To my stepdaughter, Kimberly Baller, I leave the sum of $100,000. I leave this amount to her in hopes that she will learn to respect the value of a hard-earned dollar. It is my wish that she also seeks continued help for her addiction. Another huff from Nancy set my teeth on edge. Had she expected the man to leave us his entire fortune? It wasn't ours to take. Kim was crying harder now, catching the attention from the little dark-haired girl sitting on Triss's lap. She whispered something in Triss's ear, and Triss quickly shook her head. To my wife, Nancy Baller Prescott, I leave my apartment in Manhattan in the sum of $2,500,000 to be distributed to her in equal amounts over the course of her lifetime. What? Nancy squeaked when she realized what her husband had left her. What about the house? What about all that money? Amber continued as if she hadn't been interrupted. Again. To my daughter, Trista Danielle Prescott, I leave the sum of $257 million. I was pretty sure my mother was going to choke on her own tongue at this point. As well as my collection of cars, with the exception of the one bequeathed to my stepson Dominic. To her, I also leave my properties, including my house in Larchmont, New York, where we had many happy memories together when she was a child. I don't believe this. Nancy was on her feet again. I caught her wrist when she started to pass me. I could only imagine what would happen if my mother got in Amber's face. Amber was normally calm and professional, but I could see that my friend was at the end of her tether right then. Honestly, so was I. Sit down, Mother, I commanded in a quiet tone. I will not. She tried to tug her wrist free, but I kept my grip on it, not so hard that it would hurt her, but enough that she wasn't comfortable. This is outrageous. How dare this imbecile girl walk back into our lives and take everything I have worked so hard for away from us again? She's Robert's daughter, Mother. She deserves what is his. I tugged her back a step and got to my feet. And from what his letter suggested, you have been left far more than you possibly deserve. I bent my head until my face was close to hers. Whatever she saw on my face, maybe it was the rage or even the heartbreak that she had caused, had her shrinking back. I'm contesting the will, she said stubbornly. I will not sit idly by while that little bitch gets everything that should be mine. You will do nothing! I roared, no longer able to control my emotions. Hearing a whimper from the little girls behind me, I forced myself to lower my voice. You will accept what was left to you, and you will leave Triss alone. Do you hear me, Mother? Dominic, do you hear me? I gritted out between clenched teeth. A mutinous look filled her eyes, and I knew she wasn't going to let Triss live in peace.
4. Triss. I couldn't stop shaking. I never dreamed of receiving the contents of the will. Even when my father and I had been close, I hadn't expected him to leave me practically everything. Amber hadn't even gotten to the part about his businesses, which thrived on their own under the watchful eyes of a group of CEOs Robert had put in charge. While Nancy and Dom continued to argue, my head spun. There were so many good things I could do with that money. I could put the girls in a good school. Lily deserved a good art program. Maybe I could find a teacher who would help her with it. And Daisy could stay home with me, rather than go off to daycare all day. What I was really anxious to do with the money, however, was help my mother. I knew it was too late for miracles, but I could make her more comfortable. My father's house was huge, and it was mine now. I could turn a room downstairs into a hospital room for Savannah, and get a home health nurse to come in to help me take care of her. I could find the best doctors to take on her case. Maybe, just maybe, I could hold on to her for a little longer than the doctors back in Buffalo had suggested. That was all I really could ask for. Time? Amber? My voice shook, but I was too lost in my plans to care. Amber, when can I get the money? She turned surprised eyes on me. Well, it will be in probate for at least a month, but if you need an advance, that can be arranged. I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm not sure. My mother... I was still too emotional after hearing what my father had said in his letter, as well as the will, so tears filled my eyes far too easily when I spoke of my mother. She is in the end stages of cancer. I would like to use the money to make her more comfortable. Amber's eyes softened. I'm so sorry, Tris. Get me a number, and I will make it happen, okay? I wiped a hand over my cheeks and nodded. Thank you. Tris? I turned my head at my name, my eyes zeroing in on Kim, who was still openly crying at the other end of the table, although she had stopped her sobbing. Scanning over her face, I took in everything about my stepsister. Once she had been one of my closest friends, but now when I looked at her, all I saw was the spineless girl who had let her mother destroy my life. Daisy had been concerned for her when Kim had started crying earlier, and had even asked me if she could go over to give her a hug. I'm sorry. I never meant... I squared my shoulders, staring her down for a long moment, daring her to finish what she had started to say. Why are you sorry? I demanded in a tight but quiet voice, so as not to scare the girls. Why? Because you're really sorry? Or because my dad called you out from the grave? I'm really sorry. If I could change the past, I would. Though her eyes looked sincere, I didn't believe a word out of her mouth. I turned my eyes away from her, pointedly putting her out of my mind. Amber, do you need us for anything else? I want to start back to Buffalo. I need to get the ball rolling for my mother. The quicker I can get things moving, the better. I need you to sign a few things. Can you give me 20 more minutes? She stood when I nodded and moved around the table, stopping beside the still arguing mother and son. Dom had lowered his voice, and thankfully, so had Nancy. Therefore, I could only hear the occasional word. I didn't want to hear what they had to say, didn't want to hear their voices, period. Amber put her hand on Dom's arm, drawing his attention to her. Dom, if she can't keep a civil tongue, then I'm going to have to ask her to leave. If she wants to contest the will, she is more than welcome to try. But I drew this one up myself. It's airtight. There isn't any lawyer in the country who could find a way around it. She gave Nancy a cold, satisfied smile, and I almost smiled at how evil she looked right then. Almost. If I were you, Mrs. Prescott, I wouldn't try my patience. I'm in charge of how to divide up that $2.5 million. I can split it up so that you only get $1,000 a month if I wanted to. Who knows? You could outlive us all. You can't do that, Nancy squeaked in outrage. Amber's smile turned even more evil. I'm the executor of the will, ma'am. I can do whatever I deem is necessary. Do we get to go home now, Tris? Lily asked, raising her head for the first time from her drawing. I nodded, giving her a smile that I knew was shaky. We sure do, baby. As soon as I sign some paperwork, we get to go back and see Mama. I'm glad. She lifted the drawing and my chest filled with pride for her. Do you think she will like this? I made it special for her. I ran a hand over her blonde head. She's going to love it, Lil. Anything you make for her is special. Do you like mine? Daisy asked, lifting her own picture that was full of stick figure portraits. I kissed her temple without giving it a good scan. I love it. Then I really looked at the picture and almost groaned. It was a picture of everyone in the room, with a big square in the middle for the table we were sitting at. Nancy was wearing a grumpy cat-looking face that looked remarkably like her in an amusing sort of way. Dom had a straight mouth, looking reserved and distant. Kim had tears running down her face. Yeah, it looked a lot like the room full of people. Our mother was going to laugh at this picture. She needed a good giggle. Tris, I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard Dom's voice so close to me. I had done a decent job of tuning out what was going on across the room, so I was surprised to find him standing right beside my chair now. Looking up at him, I found it hard to breathe for a moment. He looked better than ever. His mahogany hair was on the shaggy side, but I'd always liked it that way. It had been that shaggy 7 years ago when I'd loved running my fingers through it. His suit fit him perfectly, and I could see he had filled out even more with muscles. My mouth went dry, and I had to lick my lips before I could speak. Dom. Amber said you're leaving soon. He thrust his hands into his suit pants pockets, making his jacket tighten over his shoulders and arms.
We're going home, Daisy told him. Mama needs us.
He gave her a warm smile, but his eyes were full of questions. So, you're Triss's sister? She nodded her dark head.
Me and Lily. She takes care of us real good. Mama's in the hospital.
That had his eyes darkening and snapping back to me. Savannah's sick? She's losing the battle against cancer, I murmured, so the rest of the room didn't hear. I didn't need Nancy making snide comments about my dying mother. If she did that, I really didn't think I could hold myself back, even for the girls' sake. Baby, I'm so sorry. He crouched down beside my chair and reached for my hand. I pulled it back before he could grasp it, and he grimaced as if in pain. Once, I would have welcomed his touch, would have begged for it. Now, I wasn't sure how I would react to having him touch me. I didn't trust myself enough to find out. I wasn't expecting Dad to leave me so much, I told him honestly, breaking the strained silence he had fallen into. Actually, everything from today has been a total shock. He was asking for you at the end, he told me, his tongue going hard, his eyes accusing. Why didn't you come? Or at least to the funeral? 100 sharp daggers pierced my heart. My daddy had been asking for me when he was dying? That hurt. That hurt badly. But his words, his unspoken condemnation, made my blood boil. I would have been here in a flash if I had known. No one bothered to call me. His dark mahogany brows furrowed. My mother said she called you. She told me that you told her to go to hell. And of course you believed her. How nice. I rolled my eyes and scooted my chair back. Putting Daisy on her feet, I stood. Because we all know what a great relationship she has with the truth and me. He straightened, his jaw clenched so hard, I wondered if he would need to see a dentist later. You're saying she didn't call you? Either time? I shrugged. You didn't see me there, did you? That doesn't answer my question. I thought you didn't come out of spite. And once again, you thought wrong. I gave him a cold smile, proud of myself for not turning into a wimp where he was concerned and clamming up. No, Dom. She didn't call me. I didn't even know your mother had my number. My cell phone is one of those straight-talk things you get at Walmart. What the hell do you mean? Like a burner phone? His face was pale. What happened to the phone Robert gave you? The one he turned off when he kicked me out? I shrugged. I sold it for the cash. I think I used the money to buy groceries that week. For cash, he parroted. You needed money? So you burned through the allowance he gave you? I had to laugh at that. Was he completely clueless? What allowance? Everything stopped when he kicked me out, Dom. Everything. The allowance, the phone, the college tuition. He stopped it all. He wouldn't even take my calls when I tried to tell him happy birthday one year. You're lying. I asked Robert if he was still giving you those things because I was worried about you. He told me he was. Okay, I nodded. Let's say I'm lying. That would explain why I have a run-down old car that only starts when I offer up my soul to the devil and live in an apartment in a building that has some very interesting tenants at times. It's why my clothes are at least 5 years old. It's why I struggle every week to buy food for me and the girls and still pay for my mother's hospital bills that I thought I was going to be paying off until I die. With each word out of my mouth, his face became more tense, paler. Are you on drugs, Triss? I took a step closer to him, and looked up at him with pure hate in my eyes. I have never touched drugs. Never. I like my brain just the way it is, thank you very much. I would never do anything to impair it or my judgment. Although I must tell you, my judgment of you was way off. I thought I knew you. I thought you were everything. But when I needed you the most, you couldn't pull your head out of your ass to see the truth. He caught my wrists when I would have stepped back, holding them prisoner against his chest. I thought I knew you too. That was why everything hit me in the raw. Kim nearly died, Triss. My kid's sister nearly died because of you. No, not me, I snarled, hating and loving him at the same time. I wouldn't have ever done something that stupid. I respect myself too much. I know that now. Only because my father told you in that letter. I jerked away from him, rubbing at my wrists, not because they hurt, but because my skin felt scalded from his touch. You never would have believed me if I had been the one to tell you. You sure as hell didn't believe me 7 years ago. I didn't want to believe it, he whispered, stepping closer. All the evidence pointed at you, Triss. My head was all over the place that weekend, and almost losing Kim nearly destroyed me. You think it didn't hit me hard too? She was my friend. If she had died, it would have killed me. I turned away from him, unable to do this with him right now, not with my little sisters in the same room. I noticed Amber had left, hopefully to get whatever I needed to sign so we could go. How about some lunch before we hit the road, babies? I could really go for a Happy Meal.
Yes, please, Lily laughed. We haven't had a Happy Meal in forever. Can I have nuggets? Daisy asked, concerned that I would say no. And a juice box? I want extra fries, Triss. Please? I stroked a finger down each of their cheeks. Whatever you want, my little loves. I held out my hands for them, and they readily took them. Triss, don't go. His voice was imploring, but I didn't dare turn around. If I did, I was sure I was going to slap his too handsome face. Triss, please. Despite his plea, he didn't follow me as I left the conference room. Did he expect me to just jump at his every command? Maybe once upon a time I would have. Maybe I had. Now I knew exactly what he thought of me, and I was never going down that road with him again. The door had barely closed behind me when it opened again. I stiffened, but part of me held out hope that Dom had followed. It would have been a first. It wasn't him. The girls had looked back and stiffened, so I knew who it was before I even turned around. You shouldn't have come back, she spoke to my back. I can make your life even more miserable than I ever have before. I squared my shoulders and slowly turned to face her, pushing the girls behind me as I did so. Trust me when I say, there is nothing you could possibly do to make my life any more miserable than you already have. I know you cashed that check yesterday. How do you think Dom is going to react when I tell him you finally used that money? There was pure malice in her gray eyes, but the smile I had been expecting, the glee at knowing she had finally won that battle, was absent. Seeing as that was blood money to begin with, I really don't care how he reacts. Quite honestly, Nancy dear, I don't give a damn about any of you. You and your children mean nothing to me now, just as I never meant anything to you. I felt little hands touch my back, then saw a blonde head peek out from around me. Who is she, Triss?
Lily whispered worriedly. Nancy slowly dropped her eyes, and as she looked at Lily, something flashed in their depths. I was pretty sure the fact that my sister looked so much like me and my mother was killing her. My father had loved my mother dearly, though they had never meshed well as a couple. They had stayed friends up until he had kicked me out. After that, she had hated him for allowing his wife to pull us apart. "Hello, Lily."
Hi,
she whispered, and waved shyly. I stiffened at Nancy speaking her name, and quickly reached behind me, pushing her out of the old hag's sight. "Do not ever speak to my sisters." She laughed at that, but didn't speak. Turning back for the door, she called over her shoulder, "I'll be seeing you around, Tris." 5. Tris. It still surprised me how quickly things could get done when you threw enough money at a problem. What probably should have taken weeks, I accomplished in a few days once Amber had put the money in my bank account that I had asked her for. The first thing I had done was start the ball rolling for my mother. I had to have her transferred to a hospital in New York City before I could get her back to my dad's house. That was better than being hours away from her when she would have been stuck in Buffalo. I made sure that she was comfortable in her own private room before I left to take care of everything else. I had quit my job as soon as I had gotten home. Once the money was in my account, I had traded in my rundown car for a new SUV, one that was built like a tank, so I wouldn't worry about driving in the snow with the girls. From there, I had bought them new clothes, coats, shoes, and a few things for the girls, myself, and my mother. Nothing expensive. It had been nice to pull on a pair of underwear that didn't have holes, and a bra that fit my breasts perfectly, rather than squishing them together like so many of my others did. I didn't go to my father's house for a few days. Nancy and Kim were still living in the house, and I didn't want to put up with either of them, or subject the girls to their presence. Therefore, I got us a hotel room until everything was taken care of, and my house was emptied of the trash that had been living in it for so many years. With Amber's help, one of the ground floor bedrooms was being converted over for my mother and a nurse to use. On top of that, 2 of the upstairs bedrooms were being turned into rooms for the girls. I wanted them to have everything little girls could possibly dream of when we moved in. I knew it couldn't make up for all the months we had been living off mac and cheese, but I hoped it would better help them adjust to our new living arrangements. Lily was put in a new school, the same private grammar school I had been in when I was a little girl. I took her every morning and picked her up every afternoon. Having Daisy with me all day long was nice. She got to see our mother a little more than she was used to, which cheered up Savannah, and she kept me company throughout the day. Having her with me made it easier not to think about Dom. Today was Saturday, and Amber had promised me that the house was ready for us, meaning that the girls' rooms were finished. More importantly, it meant my stepmother and stepsister were finally out. The room for my mother would be finished on Monday. Then a private ambulance and her home health nurse would bring her home. Despite knowing that the house was empty except for the staff that ran the place so seamlessly, I couldn't help feeling nervous as I drove up the long driveway and stopped in front of the house. As I looked up at it through the windshield of my new SUV, I tried to remember all the good times I'd had in this house with my father. Summer had been my favorite time of year, simply because I got to spend it with my daddy. Even after he had married Nancy, I had looked forward to coming home to this house. Kim and I had been close, but that wasn't why I had been so happy to come home every summer. That was all because of Dom. From the first moment I had met him, there had been this connection. Not so much sexual, because I had only been 15 and Dom had been in college by that time. He wasn't the kind of guy who got a thrill out of having teenaged girls crushing on him and chasing after him. Still, there had been a pull for us both. I had been closer to him than I was to Kim. When I had gone home at the end of the summer, he had texted and called me when he had time between classes. As the years had gone by, our texts had turned more flirtatious, as I had grown bolder in my feelings for him. It wasn't just the flirting, though. It was how he had treated me when we were together. the subtle touches to my hand, tracing his fingers through my hair. Even those damn smiles he would give me that told me without words he was thinking of me. For over a year, we had danced around whatever was between us, until finally, neither of us could take it another second. Then, all hell had broken loose, and my life had been turned upside down.
Is this a hotel?
Daisy asked from her car seat in the middle of the second row. I turned to look at her, saw how her eyes were wide like the prettiest little owl I had ever seen, and found myself smiling. Nope, this is where I lived when I was a little girl, I told her as I unsnapped my seatbelt. My dad left this to me when he died.
That was nice of him.
My heart twisted in my chest. Yeah, I guess it was. As I got out of the SUV and opened the back door for the girls, who had already unbuckled themselves from their boosters, I noticed the front door open. Seeing Amber, I waved, then helped Daisy jump down. Beside Amber was a little boy about the same age as Lily. They walked down the driveway to greet us, and I had an odd sense of déjà vu when I looked down at the boy. "Hi there," Amber greeted with a warm smile. "Hi," I murmured, my eyes still on the boy.
"Tris, this is my son Jamie. It's not my weekend with him, but when I told him I was going to be hanging out with 3 pretty girls, he blew his dad off and came with me." She grinned teasingly at her son. "Jamie, this is Tris and her sisters, Lily and Daisy." The boy shook my hand, then turned to the girls. Lily shyly spoke to him, but it was Daisy who was taking charge, as always. We started up to the house, the kids walking in front of us. "I married Sawyer Brannan for a few years," she told me in a quiet voice, and I had a total aha moment, realizing why the boy had looked so familiar. I remembered Sawyer fondly, along with Bryce and his sister, Ash. Dom had fallen into a friendship with Sawyer and Bryce, and naturally, we had all had fun together. "But you're not married to him now?" I asked as we entered the house. Her last name was Allister, not Brannan. "Nope, I married Leo over a year ago." She closed the door behind us. "Sawyer is with Ash, actually. They're getting married in June." "Oh, well, that makes sense." I pulled off my gloves and unhooked my scarf from around my neck, making sure the girls did the same. Ash always did have a crush on Sawyer. "You saw that?" I nodded, and she grimaced. "I wish I had seen it. I never would have married him if I had known my best friend was in love with the guy. You know?" I shrugged. "It all worked out, though, right?" I glanced after the kids who were running into the living room now. "You got a really good thing out of it." Her grimace turned into a look of pure motherly love. "Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't trade that kid in for anything." Over the next few hours, Amber showed me everything that the contractors had done over the last few days. All we were waiting on was a few more pieces of equipment from my mother's room. The girls' rooms were perfect, and they screamed when they saw them. Daisy had a huge dollhouse with plenty of other toys to play with, while Lily had an entire art station to keep her happy. Both girls had their own canopied beds and connecting bathrooms. My old room was right across from theirs, and it was the room I decided to take. It didn't feel right, taking the master bedroom, not when that had been my father's room he shared with Nancy. That evening, after Amber and Jamie were gone, and I had the girls bathed and ready for bed, I finally went into my bedroom. It was the first time I had stepped foot in there all day. As I lay in my old bed, dreading the coming days before me, I tried to forget about how I had gotten to this point, how desperate I had been, how scared and alone I had felt, as my world had come crashing down around me. I didn't know what to do to fix things now. No amount of money could repair the damage that had already been done, the time that had been lost. I needed to look toward the future, but all I could see was the past
right then. A past that still held me prisoner. 6. Tris. 7 years ago. My closet was full of nice dresses, but they were too nice, as in, good girl next door nice. I wanted something sexy, something that would make Dom want to strip it off me the second he saw me in it. With Kim out who knew where, I decided to go shopping on my own. It took me 3 hours to find the right dress, and once I had it on, I didn't want to take it off. I bought matching underwear and a bra at Victoria's Secret that made my breasts look killer in the dress. I wore them home after getting my hair done. My dad and stepmother had left the night before for Vermont. A much-needed getaway, they had said. But really, it was just so Nancy could spend more of my father's money while trying to impress her snotty friends. As much as I adored Dom and Kim, I wasn't blind to the fact that their mother was a greedy cow who was only with my father for his money. I doubted they were blind to her either, but Dom was a good son and didn't question his mother too often. That was probably the only thing we ever argued about. However, I was a daddy's girl, so I could understand him being a mama's boy. Therefore, I didn't let it get me down too often. Walking into the house that afternoon, I knew he was home even without having to see him. I could feel his presence in the house. Every cell in my body was attuned to his nearness, like some odd sixth sense. Dropping the rest of my bags in my room, I walked down the east wing of the house and stopped at Dom's door. It was slightly ajar, so I pushed it open and peeked inside. He was standing at his huge walk-in closet, pulling on a suit jacket over a metallic blue button-up. Seeing his choice of shirt color, I couldn't help grinning. The dress I was wearing matched it almost perfectly, making my eyes pop. Had he picked that shirt with me in mind? I couldn't help wondering. Biting my bottom lip, I stood there in the doorway, leaning against the frame as I watched him work on his tie. Every move he made had my body amped up with awareness of him. The way his fingers fiddled with his tie, how his shoulders moved, and his chest lifted with each breath. When he shifted from one leg to the other, growing frustrated with the tie, I finally took pity on him and entered the room. "Want some help?" I murmured as I came up behind him. He looked up with a mixture of relief, amusement, and pleasure on his handsome face. "I'm willing to beg for it, if I have to." I sunk my teeth into my lip again, trying to hide how giddy I was. "I won't make you beg. This time," I said with a sassy wink as I unknotted the tie. This close to him, I could smell the clean, woodsy scent of his aftershave. It was an intoxicating scent that threatened to consume me with its headiness. Carefully, I fixed the tie, then reluctantly stepped back as my shyness began to overwhelm me. There. Perfect. Strong hands caught mine when I would have turned away, pulling me in close again. He pressed my hands against his chest, and I was helpless to not feel how wild his heart was beating. With my hands on his chest, he lowered his own to my waist, circling them around me and stroking his fingers over my hips. "Where did you get this dress?" he demanded in a low voice. "This old thing?" I smirked when he just glowered down at me. He knew I had just bought it, since it wasn't the kind of thing I normally wore. And I could see that he liked it on me. "I got it at the mall today." "You like it?" A low growl left him. "It's sexy as hell." "I hate it on you." His fingers contracted on my hips. "I want you to take it off." I couldn't contain the shiver that swept down my spine, as images of him doing just that filled my head. It made me breathless, and I unconsciously pressed into him. "You said we were going out," I reminded him. I had been so nervous all day from his promise to celebrate with me by taking me to dinner. This didn't feel like just two friends celebrating. It felt like a date. But I was too shy to ask if that was what it really was. Dom lowered his head until his nose was brushing over my jaw. "We will," he assured me, his voice low and full of promises. "Just let me see you without that dress first." As he spoke, he trailed his fingers caressingly up my back until he found the hidden zipper. In the next moment, the dress was falling apart in the back. Shivering, I stepped back from him and turned, letting the dress fall down my arms, and then to my waist before pushing it over my hips. Behind me, I heard his harsh exhale and looked at him from over my shoulder. The raw desire I saw shining out of his eyes had my already wet panties growing soaked with a need I had been too shy to let him see. But that look, it made me brave, and I turned as I stepped out of the dress. In only my bra, panties, and heels, I faced him as I parted my legs ever so slightly, giving him a glimpse of the wetness on my thighs that I didn't want to hide from him. Triss. My name was a groan on his tongue. I licked my dry lips, trying to think of something sexy to say. But as always, my shyness wouldn't let me. Instead, I just stood there, letting my eyes tell their own story. His nostrils flared with his next inhale, and then he took a step closer to me. When he lifted a hand, I noticed his fingers shook. He touched my hair, stroking the silkiness between his fingertips before pushing it over my shoulder and feasting his eyes on my body. My breasts filled the cups of my bra, almost to the point of overflowing with each breath I took. My heart was pounding, just as hard as his had been under my hands only a moment before. I felt dizzy with need, edgy, with a desire that I had never let myself slake in all the months we had been flirting and teasing each other. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever laid eyes on," he said with a growl, catching my hips and forcefully pulling me into him. When I felt the evidence of how much he wanted me pulse against my bare tummy, I couldn't hold back my moan. "Fuck, Triss. You're killing me, love." I felt his lips on my neck, just under my ear. "If you let me touch you, there's no going back. I can't go on as we have been, the flirting, the teasing, the wanting you so badly I can't see straight." He traced his tongue over a vein. "I want you, baby. I want all of you." "All?" I whispered, lost in the pleasure of being held by him like this, of having his hands and mouth on me. "All," he confirmed in a strong voice, leaving me in no doubt of how much he wanted me. "Us." "Will you give it to me, Triss?" Yes. My answer was a vow, a promise that I was already his in every way. He just needed to claim me. "Thank you." His exhale sounded relieved, and I realized he had been holding his breath, waiting for my answer, as if he had thought I didn't want him, us, as much as he did. Forcing my shyness down, I lifted my hands and cupped his strong jaw in both palms. I met his gaze boldly, showing him exactly how much I was in this with him. His next breath left him on a shudder, and then he buried his face in my hair. I stroked my fingers over his freshly shaven jaw, and up into his hair, holding him to me. We stood like that for a long moment, before he sucked in a deep breath and stepped back. "Put your dress back on. We'll be late if we don't go now." I shook my head. "No." Reaching behind me, I unsnapped my bra and let it fall forward. He swallowed with difficulty, his throat bobbing with the force of it. "I don't want to go out. After all, I promised you." He got out in a rough voice. As the bra fell to the floor, I started to lower my underwear. When they were gone, I only had my heels on. Despite my shyness, I had never felt as sexy as right then and there, with his eyes eating up every inch of me. "Make me a new one." With one large hand, he caught my left hip, pulling me against him so hard I knew I would feel his fingers for days to follow. "I promised to take my time, to worship every inch of your amazing body. He started to lower his head, his mint-flavored breath brushing over my parted lips. I promise to make every part of you feel good, and I promise you will beg for more when it's all over. My knees started to buckle at just the mental pictures that popped into my head with each word out of his mouth. He grasped my right hip with his other hand, anchoring me against him, refusing to let me fall. I like those promises, I murmured, brushing my lips over his chin as I bit my nails into his chest through his button-up. Follow through, Dom. Make them a reality. His fingers contracted on my bare flesh, and he lifted me until my feet dangled off the ground. I didn't have time to wrap my legs around him before he was backing us up, moving toward his bed behind him. When the mattress hit the back of his knees, he stopped and sat, with me in his lap. I parted my legs and straddled him. The proof of his erection was straining against the seam of his dress pants, threatening to burst through, stroking over my wet folds as I opened to him. He never let up his hold on my flesh, squeezing and massaging, helping me grind my wetness against him. Nothing had ever felt so good, so right, as what he was making me feel right then. My head fell back onto my shoulders as I twisted my hips, my eyes rolling back into my head at the pleasure, while my shoes fell to the floor. "Dom," I moaned, pushing my pelvis down harder. "Fuck," he groaned. "Babe, the door is still open." He fell back, taking me with him. Then he rolled so he was over me. He brushed his lips over my jaw, then reluctantly left me. 2 seconds, I swear. I felt cold without his heat against me. Shivering, I scooted up on the bed and pulled the covers down until I could crawl under them. Dom closed and locked his door, then turned to find me getting comfortable in his bed. "Shit," he muttered as he pulled his jacket off in a rush, then started to loosen his tie. By the time he returned to the bed, his chest was bare, and he was working on his belt. I watched in utter fascination as the belt and top button were undone. Then he slowly lowered his zipper before pushing his pants and boxer briefs down his hips, making his cock spring free. I sucked in a shaky breath as I got a good look at what I had been daydreaming of touching, licking, sucking for months now. It wasn't just long, but thick, with a pink mushroom head and dark veins popping out along the wide shaft. There were clear drops of liquid weeping from the slit at the top that had my mouth watering for some reason at the thought of licking them away. As he straightened, he picked up his pants, pulling 2 foil packets out of the back pocket, tossing them on the bed beside me. He then pulled the covers back, refusing to let me stay hidden under them. As his eyes ate up the sight of me, I fell back against his pillows. Pink filled my cheeks in a mixture of need and that damn shyness that wouldn't let me speak. I knew and loved this man. Yet this was a side that we had only teased at exploring. I didn't know what to do or how to act, and I was scared I would screw it all up, and he wouldn't want me anymore. So I just laid there, spread out for his taking. Dom climbed onto the bed beside me, stretching his long body along my own, as he lowered his head and captured my mouth in a kiss that would have had my head spinning, if I wasn't lying on my back right then. With one hand, he cupped my neck, tickling his fingers down my throat, then lower, until he cupped my breast. His thickness pulsed against my thighs, but he didn't try to touch me there yet. I tried to touch him, but every time I moved my fingers, he would grasp my hand and lift it above my head while he continued to kiss me. "Dom," I whimpered as he pinched my nipple and twisted. "I want to touch you." "I made you a promise, Triss. If you touch me, I'll end up breaking it, and I can't have that happening." He kissed his way down my neck until his lips met his fingers and replaced them. My back arched against his mouth, trying to get closer. With each tug of his lips, a pulse would throb between my legs, making me squirm against his hardness. The wetness between my legs rubbed over him, smearing across us both, as his body unconsciously thrust against mine. I tried to pull my hands free, but his hold only tightened. The look on his face was stern, as he lifted his head to look down at me. "I need to touch you," I whispered, trying to breathe as the pleasure his hands were evoking threatened to steal away the last of my sane reasoning. "Please." With a deep-throated groan, he released my hands, and, as soon as his hold was gone, I was tracing over every inch of him I could reach, feeling his heat. The hard muscles on his arms and back only heightened my pleasure. I stroked my nails down his back, careful at first, but when he growled something I couldn't understand and sucked my nipple roughly against the roof of his mouth, I bit my nails into his flesh, scratching down his back. The noise that left him was a mixture of pained pleasure that spurred me to do it again. "Hell, Triss, you're gonna draw blood." Regret instantly filled me, and I started to apologize, but he stopped me. "I love it, but I'm about to come all over you if you don't stop." He kissed my lips again. "Let me make you come, baby. Let me get your pussy all wet and ready for me. Then I'll let you scratch the fuck out of me." Before I could speak, he returned to feasting on my body, showing my other nipple the same attention. I felt bolder after what he had just confessed, and I found myself exploring more than just his back and arms. I stroked my hands down his ass, enjoying the contrast of the hair on the back of his thighs against my soft fingers as I traveled lower. Dom kissed his way down my abdomen, pausing only for a moment to dip his tongue into my belly button. The feeling of having that tiny hole stretched and prodded by his wet tongue had liquid gushing from my pussy as he urged my legs apart. As soon as I opened my thighs, I could smell myself. It was like a sweet incense filling the room, with the scents of honey and the floral body wash I used. He moved down until I felt his breath on the inside of my thighs. Then I heard him inhale long and deeply, as if he were savoring my scent. I felt pink start to fill my cheeks, but my shy embarrassment quickly disappeared when I felt his tongue lick me from my opening up to where I pulsed and ached the most. Everything inside of me tightened and started to convulse as he pressed his tongue down hard against that little ball of nerves, and then sucked it between his teeth. With the sharp pierce of his teeth mixed with the mind-blowing pleasure of having him suck on my clit, I couldn't have held back the scream of pure pleasure if I'd had a gun to my head. He sucked and licked and twisted his tongue in a way that had my hips lifting off the bed in an attempt to get closer. "Oh, God," I whimpered repeatedly. "Dom, please, please, please." I didn't know what I was begging for, but he seemed to know what I needed. I felt him tease at my entrance with his thumb, then thrust carefully inside. My entire body seemed to convulse now as he invaded my most intimate hole. Still, it didn't send me flying as I so desperately wanted to fly. Pulling his thumb free, he stretched me with his index and middle fingers. They opened and closed inside of me like scissors. My hips thrust against his fingers, wanting them deeper, wanting more. "Fuck, you're so tight, Triss." He groaned against my clit. "I'm not going to last long when I get inside this tight heat. Come for me, baby. I want to taste your pussy when you fall apart for me." I barely heard him as the blood rushed through my ears, and something deep inside of me exploded into a million blinding stars. He didn't let up on my clit, though, eating me with a hunger that seemed to consume him as he buried his head between my legs and sucked up every drop of the sweet cream that flooded from my pussy. Then he pulled his fingers from me, and when I whimpered from the loss to my sensitized hole, he rewarded me by replacing them with 3 fingers. He was rougher this time, thrusting them deeper until they reached and bounced off the gift I had only ever thought to give him. His head snapped up when he felt it again, and I instinctively shifted away from his fingers as he held them completely still deep inside me. "I've never thought this would happen," he told me in a voice rough with all the need that shined out of his eyes. "I dreamed about it plenty of times, but I never really let myself believe it could happen. Are you sure about this, Tris? Are you certain you want me to be the one to take this from you?" I licked my suddenly dry lips and slowly nodded, pressing up against his fingers this time instead of pulling away. "I've only ever wanted to give it to you, Dom. It belongs to you. I belong to you." Something darkened in his eyes. Possessiveness? Love? I couldn't tell which it was, but it made my heart shudder in my chest. "Thank you, baby." He kissed my pussy one more time, letting his tongue stroke over my clit again and dragging a shocked cry from me when my body began to pulse all over again. He then sat up on his knees and looked down at me for a long moment, while he cupped his hand around his shaft and stroked his long cock. More clear drops beaded on the tip, and I reached out without realizing what I was going to do. Stroking my index finger over his slit, then lifting those drops to my mouth, I sucked my finger to the knuckle, surprised by the salty flavored musk that exploded on my tongue. Fucking hell, Tris. How am I supposed to keep a clear head long enough to treat you like the queen you deserve to be treated as, when you do things like that? He pressed my thighs farther open and moved until the tip of his cock was right at my opening. "Dom," I moaned, as he dipped the tip in, then pulled back, teasing me again and again with just the head of his cock, until my walls were clenching in an attempt to suck him deeper. "Give me everything, Dom. Please." "Fuck," he breathed as he sunk deeper. He didn't pull back this time, slowly giving me an inch at a time. When the tip hit my hymen, I stiffened, expecting the pain that was about to come. However, he didn't give me time to think about it as he pulled back again, and then thrust hard until he was completely seated deep inside of me. "Okay?" he asked between clenched teeth. "I'm okay," I got out weakly. The pain had been harsh but quick, and now I only felt stretched and full. "Please, Dom. I'm ready for more. Give me everything." He groaned, shifting his hips. "I love this tight pussy, Tris. The way it grips me and holds me like a prisoner deep inside you. It's mine now, baby. I own this pussy." "Yes," I gasped out. "Say it," he commanded, thrusting deep once again. "Say the words." "You own it." I rushed to comply. "You own me." Dom fell forward on his arms, capturing my lips with his and kissing me long and hard as he continued to take possession of my body. I wrapped my legs around him, locking my ankles at the base of his spine as I urged him on harder with each pleasure-filled whimper that he dragged from me. "Tris!" My name came out as a roar as his release snuck up on him, and he began to fill me with one hot spray of cum after another. The new heat only spiked my own pleasure higher, and as he continued to thrust his hips, working through the powerful release that was making him shake, I came again.
7. Dom. Present day. The nurse at the station gave me a flirty smile as I walked past. I wasn't normally on this floor, but on the rare occasions that I was, the nurses always stopped and tried to flirt with me. I never paid them any attention, barely gave them a second thought, but today I wanted to blend into the background. The woman I was going to see wasn't even my patient, and I didn't know how Tris would react if she knew I was visiting her mother. I had used my connections to find out what room Savannah Everest was in. I knew that she was going to my stepfather's house the next morning, so I wanted to check on her before she left. I walked to the end of the corridor and lifted my hand to tap on the partially closed door to one of the more luxurious private rooms the hospital had to offer. "Come in." A small, fragile-sounding voice called out at my knock, and I cautiously stepped inside, unsure of how welcome I was going to be with Savannah. As I entered the room, I saw a tiny woman sitting up in bed, looking at the gray clouds and the busy city below. The room was decorated with many pictures that looked as if one of her young daughters had drawn them, as well as a few that looked almost professional. A bouquet of flowers sat on the small nightstand, and a single balloon floated above it that read, "Get well soon." Savannah had always been a small woman and just as beautiful as her daughter, vivacious and full of life. Tris had always talked about her with a look of utter love in her eyes when she would tell me how her months with her mother and stepfather were going. I knew the two were close, possibly closer than most mother-daughter relationships, certainly closer than my own mother and sister were. Now her skin was yellow with jaundice, and she looked like a skeleton with skin stretched tight over her body. She wore a bright floral scarf around her head, and when she turned to look at me, I saw the pain that she fought hard to mask quickly when she realized who I was. "Tris isn't here," she told me in a cold tone, scooting up in bed and clasping her hands together on top of the handmade quilt that covered her legs. I closed the door and crossed to the foot of her bed. "I know, Mrs. Everest. I made sure she wasn't before I came." Surprise flicked in her blue-gray eyes before she put up a wall. Like mother, like daughter. Tris had always been good at putting up her walls, especially whenever my mother had been around. I had thought she was overreacting where my mother was concerned. Apparently, I hadn't taken it nearly as serious as I should have. Not for the first time, regret churned in my gut. I pushed it down as Savannah turned her cold eyes up to me. "Then why are you here?" I still didn't know the full answer to that question. I had told myself I wanted to check on Tris's mother, that it was just the doctor in me that wanted to see if I could do anything for this sick woman. Nevertheless, I knew deep down it was more complicated than that. I wanted to find a way back into Tris's life, and the only way I knew to do that was to go through her mother. "How are you feeling today?" I stepped closer, scanning over her in a quick examination. The whites of her eyes were yellow, telling me the jaundice was worse than I had originally thought. She had a heart monitor attached to her, but it was on silent so the constant beeping from it wouldn't disturb her. There was an IV in the back of her left hand that was giving her fluids, as well as meds. I had spoken with her doctor once I had found out who he was, and after hearing his prognosis, I knew that Savannah was on borrowed time. "I'm dying, or didn't your snoops tell you that?" She rolled her eyes at me, yet again reminding me of her daughter. Seeing the resemblance of the woman I had never been able to get out of my head in this dying woman made my heart hurt with compassion. "Tris told me you were losing the battle to cancer. I just didn't know how bad it was. I'm sorry." A long sigh left her lips and she gave me a grim smile. "Tris," she shook her head. "She thinks that now that she has the money to help me, she can work miracles. She lies to me and herself and says she only wants to make me comfortable, but I know my daughter too well. I can see the hope in her eyes. She wants to pull some kind of magic out of the new bag of tricks her father's money has opened up to her, but it's too late for that." "I'm sorry," I murmured again, knowing it wasn't enough, but it was all I could offer her right then. It was obvious to me that she had accepted she was going to die, quite possibly sooner than she was telling her daughter, from what her oncologist had told me. "You didn't answer my question. Why are you here?" I thrust my hands into my pants pockets. "Maybe I want some clarity. For 7 years I thought that Tris was responsible for Kim's overdose. Now your eyes have been forced open, and you regret not listening to your heart in the first place?" Her forehead wrinkled as her hairless brows lifted. "You want me to tell you it's okay, that you threw my daughter out of your life when everyone else who she trusted and loved did?" "No," I assured her. "I realize I made a huge mistake, but I'm not looking for you to absolve me of my sins for what I did. What I'm asking of you is to tell me how she has been over those 7 years. I thought Robert was still giving her an allowance, paying for college, all the things she was used to." "He cut it all off," she said with a twist of her lips. "It was like she didn't even exist to him any longer. She wasn't spoiled, but her father took care of her up until then. She never wanted for anything. Then suddenly she had to fight against the real world. College became a pipe dream for her. Her car was taken away from her, her bank account emptied, and her cards canceled. Overnight, she went from a comfortable life to nothing. My hands balled into fists in my pockets. What did she do? Savannah shrugged her thin shoulders. She pulled up her big girl panties and found herself a job. She saved up and got herself an apartment. Derek and I hated for her to be on her own in that place, but she needed some independence. And Robert never reached out to her, not once. No. She tried to reach out to him a few times, but he wouldn't take her calls. An emotion I couldn't explain flashed in her eyes for a moment before she masked it again. Your mother reached out to her twice, but it wasn't to check on how she was doing, if that's what you're getting at. My mother? Why? She turned her head away, once again looking out the window. It had started to rain, and she shivered as if she were freezing. You mean you don't know? I wouldn't be asking if I did. She was quiet for a long moment, scanning the clouds and the city below. It's not my place, she finally said. You should ask your mother. I'm asking you. Frustrated, I crossed to the side of the bed that was closest to the window, making her look at me. Why did my mother reach out to Triss? Angry fire replaced the coldness in her eyes, the flames shooting out at me. If you don't know, then I'm not going to tell you. I assumed you knew, seeing as Nancy said she was doing so on your behalf. No, I don't know why she did it, but it wasn't for me. And now I was even more confused than before. Nothing made sense, but I was seeing my mother with new eyes now, and what I was discovering about her was that she was a two-faced evil bitch. Savannah stared up at me for a long moment, her eyes hooded as she seemed to come to a decision. You should go, Dominic. I'm tired, and I know Triss would be upset if she knew you were here. I scrubbed a hand over my slightly scruffy jaw. I'm sorry if I upset you, Mrs. Everest. That wasn't my intention. Her sigh was one of a world-weary, tired soul. You should talk to Triss. And I mean really talk, not throw accusations at her. Ask her what happened after your mother kicked her out. Ask her about the check your mother gave her. An hour later, when I should have been driving over to my mother's new apartment, I found myself outside my stepfather's house. Well, Triss is home now. I needed to remember that. I sat out in the driveway for a long time, just staring through the rain up at the house that had been home for so many years. It had been a happy home for me up until that damn weekend when my sister had nearly died. What should have been the best weekend of my life turned into a living nightmare, and I hated to relive the memories. But as I sat there, they came back to haunt me. 8. Dom. 7 years ago. I was still high on the afterglow of the last 2 days with Triss. We had made love all the first night and well into the next morning. After sneaking downstairs for arms full of snacks, we had fallen into bed again. Triss finally fell asleep on top of me, exhausted, while I was still deep inside her. Content to have everything I had always wanted, I drifted off while holding her like she might disappear if I let her go. Hours later, she stirred on top of me, having to use the bathroom. While she took care of business, I took stock of the food we hadn't devoured that morning. Half a bag of some kind of skinny popcorn she liked, maybe a third of a box of Fruit Loops, a single bottle of water, and crumbs from the pack of cookies we had practically inhaled after a night of hard fucking. None of those things appealed to my rumbling stomach, so I knew I was going to have to risk going downstairs for more food. It wasn't that I was worried I would run into my mother, since she and Robert would be in Vermont until later in the week, if I knew her. It was the housekeeper I didn't want to face. Stella had been around since Triss was a baby. She was like an overprotective mama bear where my girl was concerned. I knew she didn't like me very much, especially since she had noticed how close we had become over the last year. It wasn't like I was robbing the cradle or some shit. Triss was 19. But the way she looked at me whenever she would catch me laughing with Triss told me exactly what she thought of me with the girl she considered her own. I knocked on the bathroom door when Triss didn't come out after I heard her washing her hands. Babe, you okay? Yeah, she said after a small pause. I'll be out in a few, I just need a girl moment. Concerned, I pushed the door open enough to look inside at her. She was standing at the sink, deliciously naked. She had her hand pressed to the bottom of her abdomen as she shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. When she saw me, pink filled her cheeks, and I couldn't help chuckling. "Don't laugh," she grumbled, picking up my nearly empty bottle of mouthwash and throwing it at my head. "I can barely move." Still grinning, I pushed the door all the way open. Stepping around the bottle of mouthwash that had bounced off the door, I pulled her into my arms and kissed her. She melted against me with a moan as I kissed her until we were both out of breath. My cock was rock hard, but there was no way I could make love to her again so soon. I couldn't keep up with the number of times I had been inside her over the last 36 hours, but from the way she was hurting, I knew we would have to take a few days so she could recover. "Take something for the discomfort and then shower," I murmured against her lips. "I'm going to go down and fix us some sandwiches. When I get back, we can decide what we want to do tonight." When she tipped her head back, I couldn't resist the urge to kiss her neck. "I don't want to go out. Could we just cuddle?" "That sounds perfect." I kissed her one more time before reluctantly pulling away. "Take your time. I'll be right back." Back in my room, I grabbed a pair of basketball shorts and a t-shirt before heading downstairs. As I passed my sister's room, I noticed the door was open and could hear her talking on the phone to someone. Giving her privacy, I continued toward the kitchen. The fridge was stocked full of fresh deli meats, cheese, and veggies. I grabbed everything I needed and made 4 sandwiches. Triss would only eat 1, if that, but I was starving. Other than the snacks earlier that morning, I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. I had been on call all week and had to go in for an emergency when the hospital had been swamped after a tour bus full of teenagers had been hit by an 18-wheeler. Things had been crazy, and I had ended up spending the entire night at the hospital before working my shift the next day. During that time, I had only grabbed a granola bar and at least 10 coffees throughout the day. With the sandwiches done, I grabbed an entire container of carrot sticks and a bag of pretzels. Adding a few cans of soda to a tray, I headed back upstairs. Thankfully, Stella hadn't been in the kitchen. Maybe she had the weekend off. I could hope. As I passed my sister's room again, I couldn't hear her talking. However, as I started to walk past, I heard a strange gurgling noise that made me freeze. It was a sound I had heard far too many times during my residency. Once a person heard it, they never got it out of their heads. I dropped the tray, not caring about the mess it made as I ran into Kim's room. I scanned the room and found her on her bed. She was on her side, foam coming out of her mouth as she seized. Fuck. I grabbed her phone off the bed and dialed 911, barely noticing the few pills that were beside it, as a voice asked what my emergency was. All the training I'd had kicked in, and I moved almost on autopilot as I tried to save my sister's life. I told the woman what was wrong, that I was a doctor, and that I needed an ambulance. "Triss!" I bellowed her name as I cleared Kim's airway. "Triss, I need you!" I didn't hear her running feet, but moments later she was beside me. "Oh my God!" she cried when she looked down at Kim. "What's wrong with her?" "Overdose," I snapped. "I need your help." For the next 7 minutes, we worked together on keeping my sister alive. Whatever I told Triss I needed, she would rush to get it done. When we heard the siren, she ran down to meet them and showed them upstairs. I barked orders to the EMTs, and then we got her loaded up in a matter of minutes. One of the drugs that the paramedics kept on hand was naloxone. We kept it in the emergency room, and it turned my stomach at how many times a week it had to be used. While one of the EMTs injected her with it, I told Triss to meet me at the hospital while I rode with Kim. Now that I had a second to take a deep breath, reaction was setting in. Normally I kept my cool after a close call like this one, but I had never had to treat someone I loved before. Not like this. My hands began to shake, and I clenched them into fists as question after question ran through my head. What the fuck had my sister gotten herself into? Hours passed. My mother arrived with Robert, but after taking one look at Kim attached to all the monitors, she fell apart, and Robert had to take her home. Triss stayed beside me the entire time, holding my hand, letting me lean on her as I tried not to fall apart. She was there for me during it all, and all I could think was that I wanted her beside me for the rest of my life. I loved this woman, yet until right then I hadn't realized just how important she was to me. I knew then and there that I was going to marry her one day. I wasn't ever going to let her go. One day passed, then two. I didn't leave until Kim woke up. I had to see for myself that her eyes were open, that she was talking and breathing on her own, before I could bring myself to leave the hospital. Now that she appeared to be okay, I couldn't even look at her. I was too disappointed in her. More than anything, I was pissed that she had put me in a position where I had to be the one to save her life. It was my job to save people, to help them. But it was different when the person I was saving was someone I had loved from the day she was born. It hurt me, and all I wanted to do was get away from her. Taking Triss's keys, I drove us home. I want a shower and about a week's worth of sleep, I told her with a grim smile as I pulled into the driveway. She had a leg tucked up under her body turned toward me, and her fingers were entwined with mine. A slight pink tinted her cheeks, and she sucked in a deep breath before speaking. "You're better, mine." That she could still be shy with me after everything she had let me do to her delicious body made my chest squeeze with love for her. Mine, I told her without hesitating. Definitely mine. A relieved smile touched her lips as she leaned forward, brushing her lips over mine. "Are you sure you want to sleep?" "Fuck sleep," I growled, then kissed her long and deeply. It was several long minutes before I could bring myself to release her. Then I got out and went around to open her door. Taking her hand, I kissed her on the lips in a soft, quick kiss before we went inside. As soon as we walked through the front door, Stella met us. She grabbed Triss by the hands and pulled her away from me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do. I found it in your room and she—" Triss and I both frowned down at the housekeeper. "Stella, slow down. Whatever it is, I'm sure it will be okay." She hugged the older woman. "I just have no idea what you're talking about." Stella hugged her back hard, closing her eyes as she sucked in a deep breath. "I found it, Triss. Then Mrs. Prescott came in. Your father is so angry." A tear spilled down her cheek. "I'm so sorry. If I had just stayed out of your room, this wouldn't have happened." "I'm still lost." Triss glanced at me from over her shoulder, her brows raised in total confusion. "Maybe I need a few days' sleep myself." I caught her hand and pulled her back against me. "I'm sure it's nothing." "It's not nothing," Stella snapped at me. "Triss, your father thinks you're the one responsible for Kim's overdose." "What?" she cried, pulling away from me. "Why would he think that? I've never—" "Triss!" Robert's voice had never been so harsh or loud in all the years I had known him. He stormed down the stairs with my mother right behind him. Everything seemed to happen at warp speed after that. I looked at my mother. Her face was pale, her eyes ice cold. She held something in her hand, and as they reached us, I noticed it was a baggie of what looked like pills, the same pills I had seen on Kim's bed. Stella's words began to make sense, and I felt my heart turning cold. No. I didn't want to even think about the things going through my head, but as my mother lifted the bag and practically spit in Triss's direction, I knew it was true. "Stella found these in your room, Triss." Robert took the bag from my mother and waved them in Triss's face. "What is that?" she demanded, sounding just as confused as she had with Stella. However, I could see the comprehension forming in her eyes. Then she paled, taking a step back as if she wanted to get as far away from the bag of pills as she possibly could. "Are those drugs?" "Stop acting stupid," Nancy snarled at her. "These are the same drugs that Kim overdosed on. This could have killed my baby, and Stella found them in your room." "Tell me they aren't yours, Triss," Robert commanded, disappointment mixed with cold rage bright in his eyes. "They aren't!" she cried. "Of course they aren't." "Why else would they be in your room, then?" Nancy interjected angrily. Tears filled Triss's blue-gray eyes. "I don't know. Honestly, Daddy, I don't know what those things were doing in my room. I have never taken anything like that." My mother turned her eyes on me. "Your sister could have died, Dominic. She very nearly lost her life, all because of this worthless girl." I wanted to deny it. There was no way Triss would ever do drugs. It didn't make sense. She was so straight-laced. She hated to even take aspirin. But my tired brain couldn't comprehend any of this. It didn't make sense that those drugs were in her room if she wasn't taking them. Or maybe she wasn't taking them. Maybe she was selling them. It wouldn't have been the first time a good girl from a rich family got bored and wanted a little extra cash. It was the perfect cover. Sweet, innocent daughter of super rich man. Why would she need the money? No one would even think to suspect her.
Dom.
Triss whispered my name with a sob in her voice.
You know me. You know that I would never do something like this.
I scrubbed a hand down my face. I don't know what to think. I told her honestly. She blanched and stepped back from me as if I had slapped her. Swallowing hard, she turned to her father.
Daddy, please, I would never do drugs. I don't like to feel out of control.
You don't have to take them to sell them. I found myself thinking out loud, and Robert's face became like a thundercloud. Even as my heart screamed at me that this was wrong, that she would never do something like this, my head was telling me something completely different. I saw everything with different eyes. Kim lying on that bed, dying before my eyes. Those little pills, the same pills in the little Ziploc bag my mother was still holding. Kim in the hospital with all those wires and tubes connected to her. My baby sister, nearly taken from this world, from me. All because of those fucking drugs.
You gave these to my daughter, didn't you?
Nancy slapped Triss across the face when she started to deny it again.
I knew you were nothing but trouble, but this is even beyond what I expected from you. You and your filth nearly cost my Kim her life.
No, she whispered, stumbling back with a hand to her bright red cheek. Tears fell from her eyes in rivers.
No.
I want you out, Robert said in a voice completely devoid of all emotion. Pack your shit and get out of my house. You aren't welcome here. Go back to your mother and tell her what you did.
Daddy?
Triss sobbed.
Daddy, please just listen to me. I didn't do this. I never...
I said get out of my house! Robert roared. You are no longer a part of this family. I no longer have a daughter.
9. Triss. Present day. I knew he was coming before the doorbell even rang. My mother had called to warn me Dom had been by to see her, that she had told him to ask me all the questions she had refused to answer for him. Tell him the truth, baby, Savannah had whispered in a voice full of tears. He signed that check. He knows it all, Mom, I had tried to tell her, but she had refused to hear me. Does he? Or did Nancy lie? She had blown out a tired sigh. Just tell him, Triss. Tell him everything. You have to face this head on, or she will win. I don't want any of that for you or the girls. That monstrous bitch can't win in the end. Don't you dare let her. Before I could protest further, she had hung up on me, but not before I heard her sob. That had been almost 2 hours ago. Since then, I had been replaying our conversation over and over. I had been standing at the window when he pulled up in the driveway and had watched as he sat in the driver's seat, just looking at the house, almost as if he had to prepare himself to see me again. I was still standing there when he finally got out of his car and started up the front steps through the drizzling of rain, watching helplessly as he clenched his jaw and pressed the doorbell. I looked up the stairs behind me, making sure the girls hadn't come down at the sound of the bell. Then I waited a few moments to make sure they didn't come running down before crossing to the door to open it, since there was no staff on duty today. Stella was gone. From what Amber had told me, she had apparently been fired not long after I had left, and then suffered a stroke shortly after. I had always wondered why she had never contacted me after what had happened, but had been too scared. She believed Nancy's lies to reach out on my own. The new housekeeper had weekends off. No doubt the new woman was loyal to Nancy. Though I hated the thought of firing someone, for everyone's sake, I knew it was better if I found someone else. Sucking in a deep breath, I pulled the door open and stepped back without looking up at Dom. "Come in," I muttered. He stepped through the door. I spoke to Savannah. I nodded as I closed the door before turning toward the family room. I know. She called me. I figured she would. I shrugged as I walked over to one of the two long sofas that faced each other beside the fireplace. She's loyal to me. Even through everything that had followed Kim's overdose, she had been right there beside me, holding my hand when I was scared out of my mind. Savannah had shown me what it meant to love your child unconditionally. No matter the mistakes a child could make, a mother's love was unwavering. Sitting, I crossed my legs and looked up at him, hoping I appeared bored rather than show him the turmoil that was turning my head and heart upside down. I felt slightly sick at what I had to do. Regardless, my mother had got me wondering. Nancy was notorious about lying. I knew that better than anyone. Could she have lied 7 years ago when she had handed over that check? Bile threatened to choke me at just the thought, but I quickly swallowed it down. I had to be strong. I had more than just myself to consider now. I waved my hand at the sofa across from the one I was sitting on. Have a seat, Tom. We might as well get this over with. His lips tightened as he stared down at me for a long moment, before raking his hands through his hair. You've changed so much. I don't even recognize you now, Tris. I lowered my lashes, oddly hurt by that, yet refusing to let him see. I had to change. Life has a tendency of stepping all over weak people, and I refused to be weak ever again, especially where this man was concerned. When I had needed him the most, he had turned his back on me, letting the world kick me where it hurt the most. Savannah told me you asked about the check my mother gave you, he said after another few moments of just standing there, looking down at me. Sit down. Answer the question. I shot to my feet, anger rolling off me in waves. If you want answers, then sit the fuck down. I'm not going to tell you anything with you standing over me, judging me. I'm not judging you, Tris. Just trying to figure everything out. With a harsh sigh, he took the seat I had offered him. At the mention of that damn check, my heart had started pounding so hard, my chest actually ached. Or maybe it was because he had the audacity to ask about the one thing that had officially broken me. After everything that had happened, losing my father and the only life I had ever known, to have Nancy hand over that check, rather than Dom come to me himself when I had needed him the most, had been the last straw. The check, he reminded me when I just stood there, glaring down at him like he was the devil himself. Maybe he was. No, he was the devil's spawn, which was just as bad, especially when the real devil was Nancy Baller Prescott. 10 months after my father kicked me out, your mother showed up. I dropped back down onto the other sofa and wrapped my arms around myself, feeling chilled to my soul. She handed over a check for an obscene amount of money and had all the paperwork I needed so that my mother and Derek could adopt Lily. How much money? I watched him closely, looking for any sign that he was lying. Dom had never lied to me before, but that had been another lifetime ago. I didn't know this man. You mean you really don't know? I wouldn't be asking you if I did, Tris. He rubbed his hands over his jeans, then frowned. Lily is adopted, but she looks just like your mother. You don't know anything, do you? I whispered, feeling the tears burn the backs of my eyes. I jerked to my feet and started for the bathroom, feeling the bile choke me now. Oh, God, he didn't know. He didn't know, and now I had to tell him. Strong arms caught me before I could reach the door. Dom turned me to face him. With one strong hand, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. But I was blinded by the tears that were flooding out of my eyes. Tell me, right now, he gritted out. Yes. Lily is adopted. My mouth, along with the rest of my body, felt numb, as if my body wasn't my own. The memory of how much pain I had gone through the day Nancy had shown up melded with the pain I was feeling right then. My mother adopted her when you decided you didn't want us. But he hadn't even known. Would he have wanted me? Would he have wanted our daughter? Tris. His voice shook, as did his hands. Or maybe that was just me. Maybe I was shaking so hard that we were both trembling.
What are you saying?
Lily is ours, I sobbed. She was ours. But you didn't want her, and I couldn't take care of her on my own. My mom and stepdad adopted her. Suddenly, the trembling stopped as he went completely still against me. No. Yes. I was crying so hard. Everything inside of me hurt. It felt as if I was going to break apart, and everything would spill out of my chest through the hole his mother had punctured inside me so many years ago. I had thought it had healed, but I was wrong. It had merely scabbed over, and now the scab had been ripped off. I tried to call you so many times, but you never answered. You wouldn't pick up. Months and months went by, but you wouldn't talk to me. So I came back, but you were away. No one would tell me where you were. Nancy was here, and so I had no choice but to tell her. She said you were away with some girl, and I believed her.
Away? His face turned gray. I must have been with Ash.
I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. Snot was starting to flow as freely as my tears. Still, he held on to me so tightly, I couldn't move my arms. I asked her, begged her, to tell you. He shook his head, complete desolation filling his eyes.
No, Tris. I swear to you she didn't tell me anything. If I had known, I would have come to you. I would have...
He broke off, and I wondered what he would have done. But he didn't finish. A few months later, she came to see me. Nancy said that you didn't want anything to do with me. She advised me to forget all about you.
Fuck, he groaned.
By that time, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep her if I didn't have you to help me. So I told her if you really didn't want us, then you had to sign the adoption papers so my mom and Derek could take her. There was a sob stuck in my chest, making it burn, making the pain in my chest so much more intense. A week after I had Lily, she showed up with the papers signed and the check. Hush money, she said. Your name was signed at the bottom, Dom. I had no reason not to believe her. It was your signature. His skin had gone from gray to ghostly pale now. Even through my tears, I could see the utter horror on his face.
Lily is ours,
he wheezed out.
We have a daughter.
Even as my heart leapt at those words, I had to shake my head. No, we don't. I closed my eyes. We gave her away.
I fucking didn't,
he croaked out while releasing me. I stumbled back a few steps before I could right myself. He was too upset to even notice.
I didn't give my child away.
I didn't know that. I didn't know why I was pleading for him to understand, but that was exactly what I was doing. Legally, she isn't either of ours, Dom. She's my mother's. The paperwork was finalized years ago. All she has ever known is Derek as her father. We never told her. He turned away from me, cursing under his breath as he combed his fingers through his hair and tugged at the ends. Then, as if another thought hit him, he turned on me, his eyes even wilder than they had been a moment before.
Daisy, is she yours too?
No, of course not, I assured him. Daisy surprised us all. Mom thought she was going through early onset menopause, but really? She was pregnant. He seemed almost relieved by that, as if he couldn't handle the thought of me having another child. I watched him swallow hard, then curse under his breath again.
My mother has a lot to answer for.
Yes, I whispered brokenly.
How could she do something like this?
It was like he was talking to himself, so I kept my mouth shut.
Her own grandchild. She just gave her away without any remorse? Fuck! She's a heartless bitch.
I had already known that, but once again, I kept my mouth shut. Dom was quiet for a long while after that, pacing back and forth in front of the fire and scrubbing his hands over his face from time to time. I stayed where I was, just standing there, aching so badly, I wondered if someone could actually die from a broken heart. I already knew that answer. No, I knew that all too well. Because I hadn't died the last time my heart had been so badly broken. Finally, after what felt like an eternity later, he turned to face me. His face was blank when he spoke. "What are we going to do?" "What do you mean?" "About Lily." His jaw tensed as he said her name. "How do I get her back?" "You can't. The adoption went through with no issues. Your signature was on the paperwork. It was even notarized. Unacceptable. There has to be a way." He clenched his hands into fists. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest the adoption." "And destroy Lily in the process?" I demanded, growing angry at how he suddenly had all these great ideas to get his daughter back, but apparently he didn't give a shit about how it would make her feel in the long run. Didn't he realize that I had felt the same way over the years? There had been times I wished things were different, that I could have raised Lily as my daughter instead of my sister. It was why I had moved out of my mother's house, because seeing that little baby, and knowing she would never call me Mommy, had begun to destroy what was left of my sanity back then. The only thing that had helped was knowing Lily was better off with Savannah and Derek. She deserved a stable home, with 2 parents to love her. Dom gave me a confused frown, and I shook my head at his idiocy. "She's only ever known my father and stepfather as her parents, Dom. She thinks I'm her sister. It would confuse her at this point, and with everything else, the move, my mother's illness, Derek's death, it will only hurt her to say anything about you and me at this point." "But she's ours," he breathed, in a voice full of the same pain that I was feeling. "No, Dom. She's not ours. She's my mother's."
10. Dom. There was a hurricane going on inside my mind. Everything I had ever thought about my mother was being blown away. I loved her, had trusted her, and always thought she loved me. There was no way that was true. I could see that clearly now. She had given my little girl away with no remorse. I hadn't known about anything that had happened. Might not have ever known if Robert hadn't brought Tris back into my life. On top of that, she had made Tris think that I didn't want her, that I didn't want my own child. My mother had set me up to make me look like I was just as unfeeling as she was. I didn't know how to fix what she had broken all those years ago. I didn't know how to get my daughter back without hurting her more. She was lost to me, just as Tris was. Fuck. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to make this all up to her somehow. If my mother hadn't set her up to take the fall for Kim's overdose, we could have been married by now. We could have had Lily and maybe even a few other children running around or on their way. We could have been happy, could have been loving each other every night and enjoying the life we should have had together. All of the could-haves were killing me. Instead, I had trusted my mother, had turned my back on the woman who had been my everything, and tossed her to the wolves while my mother had most likely sat back and watched with pleasure. I hadn't let myself see how much she hated Tris back then, but now I could see it as clear as day. She was a greedy, soulless woman, and Tris had been the only thing standing in her way of Robert Prescott's vast fortune. She had nearly destroyed the woman I loved. I rang the doorbell and thrust my hands into my coat pockets. It was cold out, but it wasn't the reason I felt frozen tonight. While my mind was a swirl of memories and conflicting emotions, my body was almost numb by everything I had learned today. Moments later, the door to the house I had just arrived at opened. Once upon a time, Sawyer Brannon had been my best friend. Then everything had happened with Ash, and I couldn't even stomach him for years. Then Ash had forgiven him, and they had gotten back together. Now my closest friend was marrying my former best friend, and we had come to a truce for her sake, if nothing else. I didn't know if I could forgive him as easily as Ash had, but after what I had learned about the past, I didn't have room to judge him. I had hurt Tris just as badly as he had hurt Ash, maybe more. Sawyer lifted his brows in surprise when he saw me standing on his doorstep. Ash know you were dropping by? I shook my head. No, man, but I need to talk to her. Is now a bad time? He stepped back, letting me inside the new house they had bought over the summer. His old one was the one he had bought while married to Amber, but once he had asked Ash to marry him, they had decided to get a place that was just for them, with plenty of extra room for his son Jamie and any other babies that might come along. Come on in. She was taking a call from her editor. She will be glad you dropped by. I followed him through the house to the kitchen where Sawyer offered me a cup of coffee. When I shook my head, he pulled out 2 beers from the huge fridge. I needed something a hell of a lot stronger than beer, but it would do for now. I was driving. When I got home, however, I knew I would be spending the rest of the night with a bottle of scotch as my only companion. You look like hell, buddy. I lowered the beer but didn't place it on the counter. Then I look how I feel, I assured him. Damn, man. I'm sorry. I remember how close you were with your stepdad. This must be hard for you. I miss him, but that's not why I feel like this. I found myself confessing. I just had the proof of how much of an evil bitch my mother really is shoved down my throat. Shit, I wondered if you would ever open your eyes to how she really is. Sawyer took a drink from his own beer before shaking his head. I tried to tell you a few times, especially where your stepsister was concerned, but you refused to see it. Bryce told me to just leave it alone. I gritted my teeth, regretting that I wouldn't listen back then. Yeah, well, I see it all too clearly now. Honey, did you call Jamie? Ash's voice called out from down the hall. I could hear her footsteps on the hardwood floor as she headed for the kitchen. You were supposed to make sure he's coming home tomorrow. The kitchen door swung open, and beautiful little Ash walked in, dressed in a pair of baggy sweatpants and a shirt that hung off one shoulder. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, showing off the scar that went across her throat. 2 years ago, she never would have shown that scar off the way she was right now. Now that she was getting her happy ever after with Sawyer, though, she had become more confident about the reminder of what had happened to her 7 years ago. Even as a doctor, it had scared the hell out of me when I had traveled with Bryce to Turkey when everything had happened. To see the girl I had always considered as much a sister as Kim was, a girl I had watched grow up and loved, fighting for her life, it had been worse than when Kim had overdosed, times 10. All Ash had ever wanted was to be a journalist, and not just one who reported on fashion or local news. She had wanted to be a foreign correspondent, one who went into the war-torn countries that most were too scared to even think about traveling to. She wanted to show what really went on when war or famine or a million other tragic things happened to people no one ever thought about until they were plastered on a person's television at night as they watched the evening news. She had worked her ass off to get to where she had in her career at such a young age. She had been good at what she did, ambitious, and unafraid to do what needed to be done to get the story. That was why she had been given that last assignment that had nearly cost her her life. When I had gotten to the hospital in Turkey, I hadn't known what to expect. Seeing Ash lying in a bed with her throat sewn shut, attached to life support as she fought for her life, I had been struck mute with how easily her life could have been cut short. Just a little deeper, and her voice box would have been severed. She had been lucky that someone with her had been a medic, because if she had had to wait even a second longer out in the field, she would have died then and there. It wasn't until Ash had come around and was finally able to talk that she had unburdened herself on me. I had been the shoulder she cried on as she had finally let it all out so she could start the healing process to her heart and soul, not just her body. I still had nightmares about what she had told me, how she had been traveling with a group of missionaries and a few lone mercenaries into one of the smaller countries just across the border of Turkey. Their small caravan had been besieged during their second night of her assignment, which was to cover the story of the local militia's latest destruction to the country. They were taking children from their beds at night to join their cause, then killing their parents and burning their houses afterward. Ash had been their target, not the missionaries there to do whatever the hell they did. By then, she had made a name for herself in the correspondent world, not just with major news channels and political magazines, but also with the people she was reporting on. Her face had been everywhere for years, and the militia had known exactly why she was there. The mercenaries who were supposed to be her security had been taken out, and then she was dragged into the middle of their camp, her throat slit in front of the missionaries. Considering their job done, they had left her there to die in front of the others. Afterward, once Ash could come home, she had quit her job and found a low-key position writing for a local magazine. These days, she reported on art exhibits or whatever else her editor needed her to do that his other journalists didn't want to cover. I knew she got bored sometimes, but she refused to even think about going back to being a foreign correspondent.
Dom?
Ash's hand on my arm pulled me back from the memory of watching over her for weeks as her personal doctor until she was well enough to travel home.
What's wrong?
Years of being such close friends had given her the ability to read me easily. She could see beneath my bullshit, which had always driven me crazy. At the same time, it made me glad that I had someone who wouldn't let me hide or get away with shit. In another lifetime, if I hadn't still been holding on to the love I couldn't seem to let go of for Triss, and if she hadn't been head over heels for Sawyer, maybe we would have tried to be more than friends. Maybe. Regardless, we'd never felt more than a strong affection and an overwhelming need to protect each other. I needed to unload, to get this shit off my chest, and she was the only person I trusted to not only listen, but to tell it to me straight if I stepped out of line. Can we talk?
11. Triss. My mother settled into the new room at home with the help of Jane, the kind home health nurse that Amber helped me find. Jane, who was in her late 30s, was a godsend. She made Savannah comfortable, and then she settled into one of the guest rooms down the hall from her patient. Monday passed easily enough, and it looked like my mother was going to do well as the days slipped by. I had a new schedule, and I had to admit that I liked it. Each morning, the girls and I had breakfast with our mother in her room before I took Lily to school. Once I returned, Daisy and I would keep Savannah company until lunchtime. Usually, that was when our mother got tired and took a nap for a few hours, and I would take the 4-year-old out for a walk in the crisp autumn air before we would pick Lily up. Each evening, we had dinner with Savannah, and then it was baths and bed for the girls after Savannah read to them. That was how that entire first week went, and most of the next. I didn't hear from Dom during that time, and I tried not to be hurt by his lack of contact, or worried that he was doing something stupid where Lily was concerned. Amber and I chatted twice during the week, in which I learned that the will was going through probate seamlessly so far. Apparently, Nancy had taken her serious about the way she would distribute her share of the money, and wasn't contesting the will. The rest of my father's money would be mine within a matter of weeks, if everything went as planned. I was relieved that soon I wouldn't have to worry about money for the rest of my life. At the same time, I felt as if I didn't deserve to just have it all handed over to me. It had never been my plan to just sit back and allow my father to pay my way for my entire life. I had wanted to work for him, which was why I had picked a marketing major in college and business management for my minor. Robert had been so proud of me when I told him what my plans were, how I had wanted him to show me everything about his business. From the time I was 14, I would shadow him periodically just to see how things worked. I still wanted to do that, still wanted to earn the money I spent. I didn't want to ambush the CEOs that my father had put in place, but I would have loved to have something to do within the company he had spent his entire life building into the successful and highly profitable corporation it was. When I spoke to Amber, I had asked her who got the business, and I was surprised to find out that I owned 51% of the stocks. The day the will was read, we hadn't even touched on the business aspect of it, and I was sure that hadn't even mattered to Nancy. All she had wanted was the money. Taking an active role with my majority share of the company was something that I would have to think about in the coming months. For now, I wanted to help nurse my mother back to good health and spend some time with the girls before I decided what I was going to do about working. I even thought about taking some online classes in both marketing and business management, but that too could wait. Almost 2 weeks to the day that my mother had come home, I was thankful I had put my decision on hold where work was concerned. Savannah had become ill with pneumonia, which required her to return to the hospital. She seemed to be fading more and more before my eyes. "Tris," her oncologist said to me now, as I stood outside her private hospital room. It had been 3 days since she had been admitted. 3 days of her only getting sicker rather than better. Her heart grew weaker with each passing hour, her pain nearly unmanageable, even with the powerful narcotics I could now afford for her. "You're going to have to make some tough decisions soon." "No," I whispered, shaking my head in total denial, as tears burned my eyes. "She has more time. I know she does. This is just a setback. It's just a... The man took one of my hands, giving it a squeeze as his sympathetic eyes bore into mine. "It will be soon, Tris. Very, very soon. You need to prepare yourself for the end." I could only continue to shake my head as the tears spilled over, and I tried to hold in my sobs. At least the girls weren't there to see me fall apart. The new housekeeper adored them, and I felt confident in her enough to have her babysit them from time to time. "She's still got time." "A few more days if she's lucky, my dear, and that is pushing her time to the max." "God!" I breathed through the pain that seemed to be suffocating me. I wasn't ready for the end. I would never be ready. Just thinking about a day without my mother scared the hell out of me. How would I survive without the one person who had always loved me wholeheartedly? How could I make it from one day to the next without her? She was my hero. The one thing I could cling to when it felt like I was going to drown in the vast craziness of the world. "Tris? Tris?" The doctor's voice seemed to suddenly be coming from far away. The world began to spin, and I swayed. I took a step back, but the world began to fall around me. The last thing I remembered before the darkness finally swallowed me whole was a pair of strong arms wrapped around me as heat attempted to invade my cold, numb body. I wasn't sure how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes, it was to find them trapped in a pair that were achingly familiar. Dom held me against his chest, his warmth slowly seeping into my pores as he stroked a few strands of my hair back from my face. I was lying on a bed that he was sitting on the edge of. For a moment, just a split second in time, everything felt right in the world. Dom was there, holding my hand, touching my face. I thought there was love shining out of his eyes, and my body began to ache with need for him. For that split second, I could pretend that my world wasn't ending, that I wasn't going to lose my mother, that the past didn't exist and he was still mine. Then I blinked, and reality crashed down on me like a 10-ton weight, and the tears filled my eyes yet again. Dom wiped each one away with the pad of his thumb. "I overheard what Dr. Crandall was telling you," he murmured in that deep voice that I had always loved. "I'm so sorry, baby." "When she dies, I'll have no one," I whispered, fighting the lump that was threatening to choke me. "The girls and I will be all alone." "No," he said the word like a vow. "No, Tris, you won't be alone. You'll have me." I wanted to laugh at those words, yet the tears only fell faster. For a stolen moment in time, I had thought I had this man, that he belonged to me just as much as I belonged to him. Then I had lost him, just as I would lose my mother. Maybe not in the same way, but lost all the same. A tap on the door had Dom turning his head to look over his shoulder. A nurse in green scrubs stuck her head around the corner. Even through my wet eyes, I could see the flirty little smile she gave him, and her voice was husky with a plethora of lust that had me instantly rolling my eyes. "Dr. Crandall asked me to check on you, Dr. Baller. Make sure you and Miss Prescott didn't need anything." I bet. She seemed so ready to give him everything he could possibly want. My tears felt chilled on my skin as I sat up. Jealousy was going to eat me alive if I didn't get out of there, and soon. I hated the idea of leaving when my mother's time was so very short, but the girls needed me at home. She would be upset if I ignored the girls in favor of her. If nothing else, I knew I had to do what my mother would want rather than what I ached to do. When I shifted, Dom's eyes snapped back to me. "I think we're good here, Mindy. Thanks." The pout was hard to miss on flirty Nurse Mindy. After only a small pause where she basically eye-fucked him, she sighed and shut the door. If I rolled my eyes any harder, I was sure I was going to get them stuck in the back of my head. At least my tears had dried up. "It's getting late," he said after a long pause, where we just sat on the bed together, watching each other. "Have you eaten dinner yet?" I shook my head. "I'm not hungry." A glance at the clock on the wall told me it was indeed getting late. I groaned. I should go. I need to say goodnight to my mother, I muttered as I pushed myself up to my feet. Dom was there to steady me with a comforting hand on my back when the world started to spin again. The heat of his touch burned through my clothes and scorched my skin, branding me as his, as I had always been. "Your mother is already asleep," he told me as I found my shoes that he must have taken off me and pulled them on. "You shouldn't disturb her since she appears to finally be resting." I stopped in the process of tying my shoe. "How do you know she's finally resting?" He shrugged. "I've checked on her whenever I could over the last few days. I was concerned and wanted to see for myself how she was." I was sure my eyes looked like those of an owl as I gazed up at him. "How did you even know she was here?" "I saw you leaving the first night I was coming in. After checking with registration, I found out Savannah had been admitted." He scratched at the day-old scruff on his chin, trying to look nonchalant. Apparently, he hadn't changed all that much over the years after all, since I could read him easily. He was nervous of my reaction to find out he had been visiting my mother. At least he wasn't trying to hide it from me. "Oh," I mumbled half under my breath, before crossing my arms over my chest, almost defensively, unsure of how I felt about it. "So, you've just checked up on her?" "Actually, I've been visiting with her. I normally sit with her for a little while before I head out." A grim smile lifted his lips. "She was reluctant the first night, so don't think she just accepted me with open arms. But I can be charming when I want to be, and the next night, she even gave me a small smile." I couldn't be mad at him for seeing my mother behind my back, not if he had really gotten a smile out of her. She had been so sick over the last few days that she had barely spoken, let alone smiled for me. I couldn't even think about what they could possibly have talked about when he visited her. Unless... "You were talking about Lily, weren't you?" It wasn't so much a question as a statement, because I could see the truth in his eyes. I bit my lip to keep it from trembling and turned for the door. "I have to go." "Yes, we talked about Lily," he admitted from behind me. "She told me how good of a baby Lily was, how she started walking when she was only 9 months old. I got to live my daughter's life up until now, through your mother's memories of her." Before I could open the door, I found myself turning back to face him. His face was tight with pain, his eyes dull with the same emotion cascading through him and into me. "I talked to a lawyer the day after I saw you, Triss." Oh, God. I closed my eyes as I started to sway again, picturing what a circus Lily's life was about to turn into. Dom would try to take her from me. He would get the press and a bulldog of a lawyer, and our daughter's life would get tossed upside down. And all while she had to mourn the loss of the woman who she had always thought was her real mother. It turned my stomach to just think about what they would do to my sweet little girl. Strong hands grasped my waist, pulling me into his hard body. In the next heartbeat, he was clasping my chin between his thumb and forefinger, forcing my head to lift and look at him. "I'm not going to tear her world apart, Triss. I swear to you. I only spoke to a lawyer. I didn't set anything into motion, and I won't. You were right about it destroying Lily. I don't want that any more than you do. I'm not that much of a selfish bastard. Thank you. During my visit with Savannah, she told me how she and Derek had always talked about someday telling Lily the truth. Later, when she was old enough to understand. Yes, it was something that the three of us talked about once or twice, but I didn't agree with it 100%. I swallowed hard, then tried to clear my throat when it sounded hoarse to my ears. I don't want her to hate me. No more than I want her to hate me, he agreed. But your mother knows her time is quickly running out. I started to shake my head in denial, even as the truth churned in my stomach and made it hard to breathe again. The hand he still had on my waist tightened, and the fingers clasping my chin refused to let me look away. Baby, I know it hurts, but you have to be realistic. Those damn tears filled my eyes yet again. I know, I found myself whispering. It's just so hard, Dom. I wish I could take all the pain away from you. If I could, I would. He stroked his thumb along my jaw, and I found myself leaning into his touch, starving for even the smallest contact. This was stupid, utter lunacy. Yet his fingers felt so good on my skin. I was starved for the slightest touch from him, and even as I tried to convince myself I would have been just as desperate for it from any other person, ready to give me the least little bit of compassion right then, I knew I was lying to myself. It was because it was Dom. While I knew that he couldn't take my pain away, just having him hold me like this, having him touch me, was enough to keep my mind from shattering into a million pieces as I lost touch with reality. I needed this, needed him, to force me to be honest with myself, to just hold me like he used to. But I couldn't. He wasn't mine. He never had been. I needed to face the reality of what was going on around me. My mother was going to die soon, sooner than I was ready for. Then again, I would never be ready. The girls needed me now, and afterward, they would need me even more. I soaked up the warmth of his touch for a few more moments before forcing myself to pull away. I need to get home. He dropped his hands to his sides. I'll walk you out. I have a few patients I need to check on before I head home myself. I should have turned down his offer, but it appeared I wasn't as ready to leave him as I told myself I was. Okay. Thank you. My coat was still in my mother's room, so I quietly stepped into her room to grab it. As I turned to go, I couldn't help looking back. She did appear to be sleeping peacefully, for the first time since she had started feeling ill a few days before. She had gone from having an irritating cough to being unable to breathe on her own in only a few hours. If Jane hadn't been there to help me, I didn't know what I would have done. Now I watched as her chest lifted and rose in quick little pants. The oxygen tubes sticking from her nose were turned up almost to max flow, yet she was still having trouble breathing. If she stopped breathing, there was nothing the doctors or nurses could do to bring her back. Savannah had signed a DNR, do not resuscitate, meaning if something were to happen to her, the medical staff would have to let her go. When she had first signed that damn form back in Buffalo, I hadn't really thought much about it. I might have told myself I understood my mother was going to die from her disease, but deep down, I knew I had been lying to myself. I had been living in some dreamland, where my mother would one day make a full recovery and get to grow old and still be with me for the rest of my life. Now, with the doctor telling me that it was only a matter of days, maybe, before she was gone, I wanted to tear the damn paper up and demand they do everything in their power to keep her alive. I knew that my mother wouldn't want that, though, and I couldn't be selfish. She wanted to go with dignity, not linger while attached to machines that were the only things keeping her alive, and perhaps even in pain. Tears threatened yet again, but I fought them back and blew her a silent kiss as I left the room. Dom was waiting for me by the nurse's station, his own coat already on. As if we did it every day, he put his hand on the small of my back and guided me into an already open and empty elevator. As we rode down to the parking garage, he kept his hand on my waist, almost as if he was reluctant to release me. Walking toward my SUV, he was quiet. However, I could almost feel that he wanted to say something. I bit my lip to keep from asking him what he was thinking, and reminded myself that we were no longer friends or lovers. It shouldn't have mattered to me if he had something on his mind or not. I lifted my hand to wrap around the SUV driver's door, and heard the distinct sound of the doors automatically unlocking. Before I could open the door, though, Dom grabbed my waist and pulled me around to face him. "What?" The words were forcefully cut off as he lowered his head and captured my lips in a hungry kiss that rocked me back onto my heels. He dug his fingers into my hips as he backed me up against my vehicle and devoured my mouth as if he was starving for my taste. My brain shut down and my body took over. Lifting my hands, I thrust my fingers into his shaggy mahogany hair as I kissed him back, just as hungry for him as he seemed to be for me. He kissed me until I felt like I would melt into a puddle of sheer need at his feet. He kissed me as if he wanted to possess every inch of me, and God, I wanted him to. Dom tasted just as I remembered, like the darkest chocolate mixed with mint and lust, like all my wildest fantasies come to life. He thrust his lower body against me, his growing cock stabbing into my stomach as it fought to get free from the confines of his black slacks. I was getting drunk off him. Or maybe it was just the lack of oxygen from our greedy kiss. I didn't know, and right then, I didn't care. The sound of someone setting their car alarm not far from us had Dom slowly lifting his head. He didn't try to look around, even as we both heard the somber voices of family members leaving and arriving for other patients. His eyes drilled into mine, and I felt trapped, not only by his body pinning mine to my SUV, but by the look in those dark depths. I couldn't speak. There was an interference from my brain to my vocal cords, so I just stood there, sucking in one deep breath after another, helpless to look away. He lifted one of his hands from my waist and dived into my coat pocket for my phone. Pulling it out, he punched something into the unlocked screen, then handed it back. "I texted myself so that I would have your number. I'll check on Savannah before I leave and let you know how she's doing." I licked my lips, tasting him there, and nodded. "Thank you." I got out in a voice thick with all the things I couldn't let myself think about right then. Lifting his hand, he stroked his fingers lightly over my cheek before pushing a few locks of hair behind my ear. "Drive safely, baby." I didn't know how to respond, so I nodded and finally opened my door. He stood there as I climbed in and started the vehicle. He was still there when I backed out and drove away.
12. Dom. Staying away from Triss the last 2 weeks had been hard. Every day I'd had to force myself not to show up on her doorstep, not to ask, no, beg, for a second chance. It wasn't just because I wanted to get to know Lily, which I did, desperately. It was Triss herself. Ever since I had seen her again at the reading of Robert's will, I had felt this overwhelming need to constantly be near her. Somehow I had found the willpower not to give in to those needs and stayed away, telling myself that she needed time to settle in with the girls before I barged back into her life. Seeing how devastated, almost broken she was over her mother had changed all of that, though. I couldn't stay away now. She needed someone to hold her up while she went through this, and I wanted to be that someone. After she was gone, I went back inside and checked on my own patients before once again stopping by Savannah's room. She was still asleep when I got there, but I could tell her breathing was only growing more labored. The rattling in her chest wasn't something I had wanted Triss to have to hear. I knew Crandall had been right when he had said her time was growing short. My heart ached for Triss. Instead of going home, I took a seat beside Savannah's bed and just sat there, watching her breathe, watching over her for Triss. It wasn't going to be long now, and I didn't want her to be alone when it happened. The urge to intervene, to assist her if and when she stopped breathing, tried to destroy me, but I knew she had a DNR, knew that I wouldn't be able to help her when it ended. I had always liked this woman, and now, knowing everything she had done for my daughter and how she had helped Triss when I hadn't been there to do it myself, I felt like I owed her. She had earned my respect and loyalty, and I wanted to be there when she took her last breath. In a way, it wasn't fair. This woman was a good person, a loving mother. Meanwhile, there was my own mother, who didn't know the first thing about any of those things. Yet the good woman was fading by the hour, while the evil one would grow older, tainting more lives over the years until she finally died. However, when Savannah passed, she would be surrounded by those she loved and who loved her, whereas Nancy would most likely die alone. She sure as hell wouldn't go with me holding her hand. I was done with her, just as my sister had said she was. After talking with Kim, hearing her side of the story of what had gone on all those years ago, I knew she had been pulled into my mother's scheming. She had been weak, still trapped in her own personal hell, addicted to drugs, and our mother had promised to protect her. With Robert's words from his letter to Triss ringing in her ears, haunting her, she had decided to go into a long stay at rehab to get clean. My relationship with my sister was never going to be the same again. I couldn't trust her as I once had, not knowing what I did now. Not when she had helped tear Triss from my life and fucked my daughter's world up in the process. But I loved her, and I couldn't completely turn my back on her. We had agreed that our mother had to be stopped, and the only way to put an end to her evilness was to completely get her out of our lives. So while I supported her decision to go into rehab, she was supporting mine to never have anything to do with Nancy again. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the reading of Robert's will. I wanted to. Hell, how I wanted to. But I didn't trust myself not to do her some kind of physical harm if I were to be face to face with her. My lack of contact with her hadn't stopped her from attempting to reach out to me or Kim. She called us multiple times daily, leaving messages that made her seem lost and alone without her children there to console her. The trouble was, we could so easily see through her now, so it wasn't hard to read the meaning behind her words. Her, "I don't know what I will do now without your stepfather," meant she wasn't getting the money she was so used to spending on an hourly basis, and wanted us to foot the bill. Her "I miss you so much, darling," meant that she was bored, and no doubt wanted to play around in our lives once again. Avoiding her calls hadn't deterred her, though. She had tried repeatedly to get my doorman to let her into my apartment, but I had made sure they knew she wasn't welcome there, and even advised them to call the police if she didn't leave peacefully. She had even stopped by my office, but my receptionist and nurses knew she wasn't welcome. With Kim away in rehab, our mother couldn't easily get to her as she once had. Fuck, I wasn't even sure she knew where Kim was. As long as she couldn't get her claws in my sister, I was fine with her being clueless where Kim was concerned. Nancy was the biggest reason she had started doing drugs in the first place. Having put so much pressure on her, demanding she be smarter, thinner, more beautiful, feeling like you aren't enough to your own mother isn't a way for anyone to have to feel, let alone a daughter who only wanted to make her mother proud. Yet that was exactly how our mother had treated Kim, and I hadn't known it. I had been blind to her faults, and for that I only had myself to blame. 13. Dom. As the night wore on, I made a silent promise to Savannah. I was going to take care of her girls for her. Triss, Lily, and Daisy were mine to take care of now, and I wouldn't let her down. Dawn was starting to peek through the window, and I watched Savannah take her last rattling breath. I reached out, taking her chilled hand in mine, and held on until the nurses came into the room. Then I blinked back my tears as I got up and bent to kiss her forehead. "Don't worry about your girls, Savannah. I'm going to take care of them." After calling the time of her death, I stepped back and pulled out my phone to call Triss. Since I didn't leave the hospital, I hadn't texted her, not wanting to disturb her. Now I had to make a call that never got easier, no matter how many times I made it. It was made all the worse this time because it was the one woman I couldn't stand to hurt. Her phone rang 4 times before she answered, sounding drowsy. "Dom?" "Triss." I closed my eyes, dreading this part. She's gone, baby. No, she whispered brokenly. Please, Tom, no. Do you want me to come and get you? Or would you rather I took care of the details? I'll do whatever you want, sweetheart. My mind won't work, she sobbed out. I can't believe she's gone. I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know what to do. Just hearing her cry was tearing me apart. I'm going to sign off on everything here, and then I'll be right there. You're at the hospital? I stayed with her all night, Tris. I didn't want her to be alone. Oh my God. Dom, thank you. She was a special woman, I told her. Give me an hour and I'll be over. We can tell the girls together. As the day dragged on, I could see that Tris was falling apart. She tried hard to keep on a brave face, but I could tell she was going to break soon. Lily and Daisy cried themselves to sleep, and as soon as they were tucked into bed, I pulled Tris down the hall to her old room. I had taken a chance, thinking that she would have picked her old room over the master, and was glad to see I was right as I shut the door behind us and pulled her into my arms. As soon as my lips touched her forehead, she finally let herself break down. Each sob that left her cracked my own heart open. Her body shook from the force of it, while I held her tighter, letting her know without words that I would hold her together. Lifting her in my arms, I carried her over to the bed. I held her with her head pillowed on my chest until her sobs turned into little hiccups, and then her breathing evened out and she fell asleep. All day I held her, needing to be close to her. After arranging to have Savannah's body sent to the funeral home, I had called my nurse and told her I was going to be out for a while, and to direct my patients to one of the other doctors in my practice. I didn't know how long I was going to be out, and I didn't care who got pissed. All that mattered was Tris and the girls. This was where I was supposed to be, right there with this woman who still held my heart. She had never let it go. I held Tris, stroking my fingers up and down her arm until I fell into an exhausted sleep. Small fingers touching my arm jerked me awake some time later. My eyes snapped open, and I looked up to find Lily standing beside the bed. Her face was pale, and her eyes were swollen from crying for so long. I could hear her sniffling, her little nose running. Hi, she whispered in a pained voice. Hello, sweetheart. Can't sleep? She shook her blonde head. Want to cuddle with me and Tris? Again, I got a head shake. I'm hungry. I realized my own stomach was making growling noises and was surprised it hadn't woken Tris. None of us had eaten that morning. Carefully, I untangled myself from under Tris and stood. Leaning back down, I pressed a kiss to her temple, then tucked the covers around her before offering Lily my hand. She took it without the slightest hesitation, and my heart gave a painful lurch in my chest. Holding her fingers like my life depended on it, I took her downstairs. The kitchen was fully stocked, but I had no idea what to feed a 6-year-old. What would you like? I asked, showing her the contents of the fridge. Can you make grilled cheese? Whatever you want, precious. I pulled out the cheese and butter and then went in search of a pan. Lily pulled a chair over to the stove to assist me. Just puts 2 slices of cheese on it when she makes them, she instructed when I only placed 1 slice on the buttered slice of bread. I quickly added a second piece of cheese. When it was done, she inspected it, then looked up at me expectantly. Tris cuts off the crust. After I carefully cut off the crust, she continued looking down at the plate, a small frown on her beautiful face. She cuts them into 2 triangles. The little square became 2 triangles. Perfect? I asked, holding my breath in case Tris waved some kind of magic spell over the cheese next that would make the grilled cheese taste just right. After another thorough inspection, she finally nodded her head. Can I have carrots too? Returning to the fridge, I pulled out a container of carrot sticks. I took out a small handful and placed them beside the grilled cheese. What's next? Milk? Lily asked around a small bite of her sandwich. Coming up. Once her snack was complete, I pulled out the fixings for a sandwich for myself. My sandwich was stacked high with everything I could find to put on it, and then I sat down across from the little girl with my own glass of milk for my first meal with my daughter. We ate in silence, but I was okay with that. It gave me time to watch her. The way she ate reminded me of Triss, all dainty and graceful. Everything about her reminded me of Triss. The shape of her nose, the tilt of her chin, even her ears reminded me of the woman asleep upstairs. She was Triss's clone. There was nothing about her looks to suggest that she had gotten even a little of myself, but I was more than fine with that. I didn't want to taint this precious little girl with the DNA that I had given her. I didn't want to think about the fact that she tragically shared the same blood that flowed through my mother's veins. Fuck. I didn't want to think about the fact that I shared the same DNA, the same blood, the same evilness that Nancy contained. When the grilled cheese was all gone and only a few carrots remained, Lily wiped her mouth with a napkin and wrapped her arms around herself. "Do you want to color with me, Dom?" I could see that she wanted me to, and there was no way I could have turned that sweet little voice down. She took my hand and led me upstairs to her room as the sun began to go down. There was an entire art station set up on one side of the room. I sat down in one of the small chairs and noticed some of the artwork already hanging on the walls. Holy shit, my kid had talent. I sat there watching as she created a masterpiece just using a case of crayons and a blank piece of paper. Her fingers moved with sureness like they had a mind of their own. The way she could blend one color into another as if they bent to her will. It was beautiful. "Don't you like to color?" she asked after she had been coloring for a while and noticed I had yet to pick up a single crayon. "I like watching you," I told her honestly. "How do you do that?" She shrugged her tiny shoulders. "I just see something in my head and start coloring. It's easy." "Will you color me something?" She gave me a small smile. "Sure, if you want me to." "Can I have the one you're coloring now?" She nodded. "Thank you. I'll put it on my desk at work." "Where do you work?" "I'm a doctor." Her face scrunched up as she lifted her eyes from her picture. "Were you my mama's doctor?" "No, sweetheart." "Oh." She let out a sad but relieved sigh. "I don't like doctors, but you're nice. Can you be my doctor?" "I would gladly be your doctor, Lily. If you're ever sick, just call me and I'll take good care of you, okay?" Lily started to nod when her attention was pulled toward the door. Turning, I found Triss standing in the doorway. Grief poured off her in waves, but when she saw Lily coloring, a sad smile tilted her lips. "Looks like you two are busy," she murmured as she crossed the room. She knelt beside Lily, looking at her picture. "Wow, Lil, that's so pretty. Want to put this one on the fridge when you're done?" She shook her head. "No, I promised it to Dom." "Ah, I see." Her blue-gray eyes lifted to mine, her smile turning shy. "Have you been up long?" "About an hour," I assured her. "We haven't gotten into too much trouble, have we, precious?" "Nope. Dom made me a grilled cheese and I helped." Triss's eyes widened. "Wow, I bet that was fun." "Don't worry. Lily showed me exactly how you make it, so it was just perfect." I winked at her, making her blush. "Apparently you're a rock star at making grilled cheese." That coaxed the tiniest of grins from Triss. "I do make a mean grilled cheese." I took her hand and tugged her up then onto my lap. Triss came willingly, if a little shy. "Are you hungry, babe? I'll go down and fix you something if you want." She shook her head, that tiny grin disappearing. "No thanks, I'm not hungry." I stroked my hand over her arm and was rewarded with a sprinkle of goosebumps wherever my fingers touched. "I know you don't feel up to it, but you have to eat. You don't want to make yourself sick, Triss." Lily's head snapped up at that, her eyes filling with fear. I instantly regretted my words. "You can't get sick, Triss. Please don't get sick." Triss reached over, cupping the girl's face. "I'm not going to get sick, baby, I promise. You have to eat something, please." I felt more than heard her huff, but she stood.
Okay, I'll eat. Will that make you feel better? She shot me a glare. Both of you? Yes, Lily and I said at the same time. I pushed to my feet, not trusting her to eat properly if I wasn't there to make sure she did. Knowing her, she would only grab a handful of junk food and then satiate something nourishing. Keep coloring, Lily. I'm going to make Triss something to eat. Relief filled her eyes. Okay. I followed Triss downstairs and found her in the pantry, eating cookies straight out of the pack. Shaking my head at her, I pulled her over to the island and down into a chair. Pulling the same fixings I had used for my own sandwich earlier, I made her one. She made a face at the food, but after the first bite, her appetite finally kicked in and she devoured it like she hadn't eaten in days. I sat across from her, quietly watching as she ate. When the last crumb went into her mouth, she made a face at me. Thank you. That's why I'm here, to take care of you. Catching her hand, I lifted it to my lips and kissed her palm. I heard her breath hitch and was thankful when she didn't pull away. I'm not going to leave you, Triss. I'm here for you and the girls. Understand? Her teeth sank into her bottom lip, but she finally nodded her head. Okay, she whispered, a little brokenly.
14. Triss. I wasn't sure how I would have survived the next few days without Dom there to hold me up, when all I wanted to do was fall. He took care of everything. From the details of the funeral to getting the girls to eat 3 times a day. He was the shoulder all 3 of us cried on at night, when none of us could sleep, and we ended up in my bed cuddling. Through it all, he didn't complain once, and I was thankful to have him standing beside me as we lowered my mother into the ground beside Derek, back in Buffalo. When the funeral service was over, we made the long trip back home and spent the night once again tucked into my bed. Dom slept in the middle, with me on his right side and Lily on his left, and Daisy on top of him. I knew it was crazy to let myself get used to this, but it felt so good when everything else in the world hurt so badly. Days passed, turning into 1 week, then 2. A month passed, and still Dom was there with us every day. Even when Lily went back to school after having been given extra time to grieve, he was still there with us, every day. He didn't go to work, didn't leave the house unless it was to take Lily to school. Lily and Daisy had already started sleeping in their own beds again, but each night, he slept in mine, holding me. It was dangerous to let myself continue to lean on him the way I was, to rely on him for so much. But I was growing addicted to him a little more every day. My addiction was made even worse because I knew I still loved him just as strongly now as I had 7 years ago, despite having felt abandoned by him when I had thought he signed the adoption papers and that stupid check. I had still loved him. Now that I knew the truth, it was hard to fight my ever-growing feelings for him. After weeks of my father's will being in probate, Amber finally let me know that all the paperwork had been finalized and had finished the probate period. The money that was transferred into my accounts felt heavy, and more of a burden than anything else now. While my mother had been alive, that money had been a godsend. Now that she was gone, it felt more like a life sentence in purgatory. To think that it was that money that had been the reason Nancy had wanted me out of my father's life made it feel tainted, dirty. To feel better about it, I made a trust fund for both Lily and Daisy. Then I told Amber to donate almost everything else. "Are you sure?" I could hear the shock in her voice. I was giving up a hell of a lot of money, but the truth was, I didn't need it. Even if I didn't take an active role in my father's company, with my 51%, I would be able to live comfortably off the income of the stock alone. I didn't need the money, didn't really want it, and I was sure there were worthy charities that needed that money more than anyone else. Plus, I knew it was going to make Nancy explode when she found out I had given all the money away that she had been so desperate for that she had ruined my life. It might have sounded spiteful and petty, but it made me want to laugh, something I hadn't done much of at all in the weeks since my mother's death. Yes, I assured her. I'm very sure. Just make sure you tell me what charities you donate to. I'd like to keep track of where the money is going, and could you send a list of all of them along with how much you donate to Nancy? I heard Amber bite back a chuckle. That won't be a problem. I might drop that off to her personally, just so I could have the pleasure of watching her eyes bug out of her head when she realizes what happened to all the money she was itching to get her greedy hands on. I fought back a grin. Take pictures. You bet. We chatted for a few more minutes before Amber had to get back to work. That's a hell of a lot of money to just give away, Dom spoke, causing me to jump. I had thought I was alone, having taken the call in the library so I could have privacy since Daisy was running around hyper as hell today. I was glad she was bouncing back so easily, but she was exhausting with her new energy. Tossing my phone onto one of the many tables around the room, I looked up at him. It didn't feel right taking all of that money. I don't need it. The girls have a trust fund set up, and that's all that really matters in the long run. He thrust his hands into his pockets as he came farther into the room. That was very generous of you, but nothing I didn't expect. You have the kindest heart I have ever seen, baby. Pink filled my cheeks as I tried to brush off his compliment. This seemed like it would be a heavy conversation if I dived into it with him, and I was nervous, needing to keep anything we talked about light. I didn't want our current truce to stop, any more than I wanted him to walk away. It's not like I'll be poor again, Dom. I'm still going to have the money from the stocks from my father's company. That will give you plenty of income, he agreed. But have you given any thought about working like you and Robert used to talk about? It's crossed my mind. Over the last week or so, it had been front and center in my mind. I needed to work, if for no other reason than to keep myself distracted. The girls were starting to put the pain of Savannah's death behind them, as only children could do. For me, it was still as raw and painful as if it had only happened the day before. His brows lifted at my response, as if he could read my mind. What's stopping you? I shrugged. I don't have the skills or the education. I can't just step in and start pushing my weight around. I would only screw everything up. No one said you had to go in there and start throwing your weight around, baby. You could start by simply going to board meetings, slowly diving back into it. He took one of my hands in his, entwining his fingers with mine. You have a good head for business, Triss. You're brilliant and a wicked fast learner. Whatever you decide to do, I know you will be amazing. I'll think about it, okay? I tugged my hand free, though all I wanted to do was let him hold it forever, and stepped back. I have plenty of time to decide what I want to do. Dom followed me, not letting me put any distance between us. We should talk. Here it comes. He's going to leave. Not that I could blame him. Dom had put his life on hold while he had taken care of me and the girls. I forced a bright smile to my lips. Sure. What's up? Don't go. Please, don't go. About Lily. I turned away from him, pain slicing my chest open, and took a seat on one of the chairs scattered around the room. What about her? Actually, not just her. It pertains to Daisy as well. He wasn't letting me get far. Following me, he pulled me up from the chair, and then sat himself down before pulling me onto his lap. With one strong hand, he caught the back of my neck, massaging it while trapping me. Okay? Your mom's will states you're their guardian. But have you thought about adopting the girls? Of all the things he could have said right then, that was not even close to what I had been expecting. When he had mentioned Lily, I thought he was going to stir things up, that he wanted to push my hand and make me tell her that she was actually my daughter, not my sister. Honestly, that was something that I thought about daily. I wanted her to know she was my baby. I wanted so many things. However, I couldn't do that to her. Not when she was just starting to get back to her old self after Savannah's death. That's something I would need to talk to the girls about, I said after a moment. I'm their guardian, and that doesn't really take the place of a mother. Baby, you've been a mother to them for months now. Savannah told me how good you are with them. You treat both Lily and Daisy like your own. He stroked his thumb over the pulse at the base of my throat. They adore you, and I know you love them more than anything in the world. I think you should discuss it with them. I lowered my head to his chest and nodded. Okay, I'll talk to them about it soon. He shifted under my weight, and I felt why as soon as his cock pulsed against my hip. I shivered and pressed my thighs together, hoping to alleviate some of the tension coiling deep between my legs. All the nights he had been sharing my bed, he hadn't tried to touch me even once. I knew it wasn't because he didn't want me. He couldn't hide how affected he was by me. I didn't know why he hadn't tried to take things further than just holding each other every night. But I hadn't wanted to ask, either, for fear it would make him stop sleeping with me. Tris. My name felt like a caress on his lips, as I felt him touch them to my forehead. I love you so damn much. My head jerked up, nearly head-butting him in the process. What did you say? I was dreaming. There was no way I had just heard him say those words. Just moments ago, I had been scared he was going to leave me, that he didn't want to deal with me and all the craziness that came with me. And now he was telling me he loved me? It didn't seem real, or even possible. His eyes were dark with the emotion swirling around in them. I love you. I always have. Even when I had convinced myself you were responsible for Kim's overdose, which was pure idiocy on my part. I loved you. There hasn't been a single day in 8 years that has gone by that I haven't loved you. I didn't know if I was happy to hear his confession, or sad that it had taken so long for him to tell me. Tears filled my eyes. All the wasted years. All the destruction to our hearts and our lives. It hadn't needed to happen like that. Yet it had. I love you too, Dom. I always have. Even when I thought you didn't want me or our child. I loved you. I always will. The words spilled out of my mouth before I had even given my brain permission to speak them. But I didn't regret them. I only regretted that it had taken so long for either of us to say them out loud. His face twisted in a mixture of pain and pleasure as he pulled me down to his mouth so he could kiss me. I turned on his lap until I was straddling him, feeling the evidence of how much he wanted me flexing against my sex through our layers of clothes, and kissed him back. We both knew nothing more could happen but this kiss for now, since the girls were home, but we savored every moment of it. The kiss was passionate at first, hungry. Our hands were everywhere. As it went on, it turned tender, loving. It was the kind of kiss that stood the test of time, just as our love had. When he lifted his head, he was smiling, but it was a sad smile. It kills me that I've wasted so much time. If I had only listened to you, we could have been married by now and Lily would have stayed ours. His head fell back against the chair, but he was still caressing my body, almost as if he couldn't stop himself from touching me, as if he craved constant contact. I kissed his chin. We don't know if that would have happened. There's no way of knowing if we would have still been together now. Your mother didn't want us together, Dom. She hated me. Hates me still. She would have found a way to break us up. No, he denied vehemently. If I hadn't listened to her lies, I would have asked you to marry me after our weekend together. You would have? Babe, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. That hasn't changed for me. An emotion I had rarely seen from him filled his eyes. Doubt. Has it changed for you? No. My answer was without hesitation. For a while I tried to lie to myself and thought that I was better off without you, but this past month has shown me that I was wrong. You stepped up and took care of not just me, but the girls, too. Not many guys would do that, And I was reminded why I fell in love with you in the first place. I want us to try. My heart twisted with love. And I don't want you to think this is some ploy to get closer to Lily. As much as I want to be a part of her life, I would understand if you told me to go to hell where she is concerned. It's my fault for never checking on you myself to make sure you were okay. It's on me for not even thinking our time together had created something remarkable. I could read the shame, the regret, and so much more in his eyes. If you told me to walk away right now, I would respect that and never bother you or her again.
Dom,
I began, but he shook his head. I'm not asking you to tell her who we really are to her. I don't want to upset her any more than you do after all she's been through. I would be happy to play any role in her life you are willing to give me, but that isn't why I want to be with you.
Tears filled my eyes, something they did all too often lately. This time, though, they weren't sad. I want to try, too, I told him before kissing his chin once again. I want you in my life, and Lily's and Daisy's. I want a family. Him, us, all four of us. Everything that came with it, and so much more.
You want me, even though my blood is tainted with my mother's DNA?
I grimaced at the mention of Nancy. I love you, and I don't care whose DNA you share. I know she comes as part of the deal, but I'm okay with that, as long as she leaves the girls alone and I get to be with you.
Dom clenched his jaw. You don't ever have to worry about her messing with Lily and Daisy. I've made sure that she knows to stay clear of them, and you.
What do you mean? I knew he was upset at his mother, but I had assumed he would eventually forgive her.
I finally talked to her a week or so ago. Told her that if she even breathed wrong in your direction, I would let Ash print every dark secret she's ever tried to keep hidden.
An evil glint flashed through his eyes.
She knows not to fuck with me, because I won't even hesitate to use whatever I have against her. And Ash is my closest friend. All I have to do is say the word, and she will print whatever I say.
Holy shit! I never in a million years would have thought Dom would do something like that to Nancy. Nevertheless, I believed him when he said he would. He had threatened his mother with one of the few things she held dear, her public image. He had to know by doing that he was cutting all ties with her. He picked me over his mother. I covered his mouth with mine, unable to hold back now that he had proven to me that I meant more to him than Nancy did. She wouldn't be constantly in the background, and I wouldn't be constantly wondering what shoe she would drop next. I would have put up with it for Dom's sake, but he had made sure that I didn't have to. That meant more to me than anything else he could have ever possibly done for me. He hungrily kissed me back, moving his hands to my hips and holding me against the hardness that pulsed between us. I wanted him, needed him. Now, take me upstairs, I begged between kisses. Please, make love to me.
Fuck, he groaned, and stood with me in his arms.
I wrapped my legs around his waist as he crossed the library and headed for the stairs while continuing to kiss me. I didn't know how he got us up to the second floor without dropping me, or falling and killing us both in the process. My room was so close. I could taste the urgency of his need. I ached to feel him deep inside me.
Tris?
Lily's voice stopped Dom in his tracks, and we both turned to find Lily and Daisy standing outside their rooms. His fingers contracted on my hips before he slowly, reluctantly, lowered me to my feet.
"What are you doing?"
she asked, and I felt my cheeks fill with pink. Dom was just helping me." He had to smother a grunt at my hastily thought-out explanation.
"Helping you with what?"
Daisy demanded suspiciously.
"We were kissing, sweetheart," Dom told her when she eyed him hard. "Because we are happy." "But you're not married."
She crossed her arms over her chest, glaring up at him. He crouched down in front of her so they were on an even eye level.
"No, but she is my girlfriend, and I'm hoping one day she will marry me."
I couldn't hold back my gasp.
But it was the girl's reaction to his words that had tears filling my eyes. "You're going to marry Tris?" Happiness was coming off Lily in waves. "That means you would be a part of our family." "Yeah, precious, it would. Do you think you would be okay with that?" She threw herself against him, and I watched as Dom closed his eyes, savoring this moment with our daughter. "I would love it. You're the bestest, Dom. I love you, and I don't want you to go away. Ever."
"I want you to marry Tris," Daisy told him, hugging him too. "Can you get married tomorrow?"
He chuckled, and I smiled, despite my trembling lips. "I don't think Tris is ready yet, sweetheart. But when she is, you better believe that I'm going to marry her as soon as I can." He pulled back enough so he could look at them both. "Okay?"
"Okay,"
they both said at the same time with bright, happy smiles on their little faces. "Great. I'm glad we're all on the same page." He straightened and held out his hands for each of them to take. "How about we go get some dinner? I'm starving." His eyes went to me, and the wink he gave me made my already soaked panties even more wet.
"Can we have pizza?" Daisy asked excitedly. "I want tacos," Lily told him.
"What do you want, Tris?" Dom asked with a wicked look on his sexy face. "I could go for pancakes," I told him with a smirk.
"Yeah!"
the girls said with a cheer. "Anything for my girls," he murmured.
Epilogue. Dom. 2 years later. The sun was shining down on us through a few fluffy white clouds, and the girls were both overflowing with excitement as they practically dragged me down the street toward the Savannah Everest Memorial Building. I was overflowing with it myself. I couldn't wait to see her, to tell her our news. The building was part of the charity foundation that Amber had talked Tris into starting not long after she had told the other woman she didn't want her father's money. It was just too much money, and too many worthy charities for Amber to feel good about donating it herself. Therefore, she had convinced Tris to start a foundation, and over the last 2 years she had turned it into her new mission in life. Tris and a handful of other wealthy and generous souls had come together to start the Savannah Everest Memorial Foundation. I was so proud of my girl and what she was doing. I fell in love with her a little more every day. The foundation wasn't the only thing she had been busy with the last 2 years. After talking to the girls about adoption and their resounding squeals of delight, Tris had adopted both Daisy and Lily, and with the mention of adoption, we had decided to come clean with Lily about just who we really were to her. The year before, we had both broken it to her that she was our daughter, and then held our breaths as we waited for her to turn hate-filled eyes on us. Thankfully, that hadn't happened. She had been a little confused for a short time, but after we had fully explained everything to her, that while we had been apart, Tris had been unable to take care of her like a mommy should, and that Savannah and Derek had been so happy to have her as their own little girl, Lily had accepted the explanation, and even me as her father. I had thought life was pretty fucking perfect after that, but of course I had been wrong. There were still a few things missing, like a ring on my girl's finger, and maybe a few more babies to fill up that behemoth house Robert had left her. The former I had made happen last Christmas, after making sure that both Lily and Daisy were still okay with me asking Tris to marry me. Our wedding had been small, with only our closest friends in attendance only weeks after Tris had told me yes. "Come on, Daddy." Lily tugged harder on my hand, her and Daisy practically dragging me along behind them. My heart leapt at the sound of that one little word that packed such a powerful punch. I was never going to get tired of hearing my baby girl call me Daddy. Never.
"She's going to be so surprised,"
Daisy squealed as we entered the 4-story building that was her mother's legacy. It was small by New York City standards, but it was all Tris needed for the work she did. "Girls, calm down. She will still be there if we slow down a little." Not that I really wanted to slow down, but hey, I had to at least try to get the girls from getting too carried away. A security guard at the entrance to the SEMF building opened the door for us with a welcoming grin for the girls. "Hello, little ladies. Here to see your mom?" Lily returned his grin.
"We have a surprise for her." "Lil,"
Daisy shushed her.
"we promised Daddy Dom we wouldn't say anything."
If I loved when Lily called me Daddy, I was ecstatic whenever Daisy called me Daddy Dom. I had never imagined or dared to hope that the younger girl would accept me so easily and thoroughly that she would want to call me Daddy. Yet she had, and the month before my own adoption of the girls had been finalized. Pink filled Lily's cheeks as she looked up at me with regret in those eyes that were so like her mother's. Sorry, Daddy. It's okay, precious. Soon it won't be a secret anymore, right? She nodded, her excitement returning. Right. She waved at the guard, and then we headed for the stairs since Triss's office was only on the 3rd floor, with the top reserved for the conference rooms. As soon as we reached the 3rd floor, Triss's secretary lifted her head. Sam gave us a quick grin and waved us on in. The girls released my hand and ran to open her office door, with me right behind them. Her head popped up from her computer as soon as we entered. There are my loves, she murmured, love and adoration shining out of those blue-gray depths. She pushed to her feet and walked around her desk to hug the girls. I wasn't expecting to see you until dinner. You have totally made my day. She slowly straightened, then walked into my already open arms. I pulled her in close, taking my time as I kissed her long and deeply. When I could finally bring myself to relinquish her lips, I pressed my forehead to hers and told her our happy news. You're pregnant. Her body jerked with my quietly spoken words, and she pulled back to look at me, tears filling her eyes. Really? She breathed, almost as if she was afraid to say the word too loudly. Really, I assured her, my own happy tears blinding me for a moment. We had talked for a long time about kids. Both of us wanted more, but we had been reluctant to try for a baby of our own. What if Lily resented us if we had another biological child? What if Daisy did? It was actually the girls who had brought up the whole subject of more kids. Daisy had told us months ago that she wanted a baby brother for her birthday, and after finally asking them how they felt about us having a baby, and them almost begging for another sibling, Triss and I had started trying. The trying was the fun part. The waiting, not so much. Regardless, it hadn't taken us long. She had missed her period 2 days ago, and I had done some blood work on her myself the day before. As soon as I had gotten the results back, I had picked the girls up from school, and we had come to tell her our news. Maybe I should have waited to tell the girls, but I didn't want to keep this from them. We get to be big sisters, Daisy told her, pulling our attention back to her and Lily. Can we name the baby Rhino if it's a boy? Triss gave me a look of pure horror. No, Daisy, Rhino is not an option. But I want to name the baby, she said with a pout. I bent and lifted her into my arms. We have plenty of time before we have to decide on the baby's name. I'm sure we will find a name we can all live with by then. If it's a girl, can she have a flower name like me and Daisy? Lily asked. Maybe Rose or Marigold? Or could we call her Mary for short? Or Poppy, Daisy suggested. Triss leaned against me, an amused twinkle in her eye. I really hope we have a boy. I gave her a quick, hard kiss before teasing her. I don't know, babe. I would love another girl. Maybe we could call her Azalea or Petunia or Iris. I was teasing, but her sharp inhale told me I had hit on something. I like Iris, she murmured thoughtfully. Me too, Lily seconded. Me three. Daisy kissed my cheek. Good job, Daddy Dom. 7 months later, a screaming Iris Savannah Baller was placed in her mother's arms, and I knew that our world was finally complete.
This has been an Audible Studios production of His Stolen Secret, Book 2 of His Secret series, written by Terry Ann Browning, performed by Carly Robbins and Jacob Morgan. Executive producers, Anthony Roberts and Mike Charzuk. Producer, Neil Basic. Copyright 2017 by Terry Ann Browning. Sound recording copyright 2017 by Audible Inc. Audible Studios is a division of Audible Inc. If you enjoyed this audiobook, be sure to get more books in the His Secret series today.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.